You know, so we did have, you know, when we first went back to in person, we did have one board member who was like, I'm not going to show up to a meeting in person.
Yeah, I think some of us were there at that in-person meeting.
Yeah, so you know, we'll see what happens. You know, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to put anybody on the spot here to say whether how you feel about it now. But if, however you do feel, you know, just shoot me and Amanda an email letting us know, you know, whether you plan on taking it in person or whether you'd like some special accommodations. You don't have to say it here unless you want to, of course.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Seth, you're intern.
Awesome. Hey, sorry, I'm like board meeting hopping here right now. Just like get used to a new set of faces on my screen. So sorry, it's been a long day. We can jump right into this. I'm trying to like pull up the agenda here. I apologize. But are we starting with Croton Avenue?
So I don't think so.
Oh, I thought we were.
There are two Croton Avenues.
There's
Yes,
two Croton Avenues. They're
There's
both
two
on
Croton.
Croton Avenue. So
Yeah.
we'll start off. Yeah. So we're starting off with sorry.
31 Croton Avenue.
Yeah, I think we were
Yeah.
thinking about starting off in 31 Croton Avenue, and I'm just gonna
That makes
see
sense.
who's here in the participants list.
I think that makes the most sense because there are members who need to recuse for the for 136, 140.
Right. And we can just let
All
them
right.
go.
Okay. All right, so let's do that. Let's get started. Just a kind of a quick rundown. We have requested that BFJ kind of take a look at this for the form-based code stuff. There are elements of this project that are, you know, that fall under the form-based code, the height, some of the setbacks and other components. There are certain items that don't. So the parking waiver that's in front of you is not a part of that. We do have JB Hernandez here today. I had actually heard that he was not feeling so well. So I didn't even know that he was going to be here today. So I will, I think at this point, if you want, we can either talk about it a little bit or we can.
Yeah, I mean, before we bring JB in, I mean, just, you know, where, I guess, the purpose of this discussion, right, is to understand our comfort level with this as a form-based project. I mean, I want to make sure that we're being kind of clear in terms of how we're discussing it and where we want to land with it. So, I mean, you know, at this point, they've submitted it as, they initially submitted as form-based, right? Then they went back to doing a, you know, standard zoning and getting variances, and now it's kind of back on the other side, right? So, I think that's
let me try to explain that a little bit. So initially they came in under the form-based code. The reason they wanted to be able to use the form-based code was because it allowed them to get the height that they were seeking. The extra story in the VC district or the downtown overlay zone was something that could be granted for special permit from the Board of Trustees. It also allowed them to have first floor residential was something that they would be seeking. And the parking regulations were unchanged from the VC district, so they would be able to seek a parking waiver, you know, just in either way, because the form-based code does not have set parking regulations for it. And so they thought that made sense. When we spoke to BFJ initially, they said, you know, they're going to need a bunch of variances from the form-based code to make this work. It might just be easier for them because they would have less regulations and there'd be less, numerically less variances under the regular VC district code. Maybe they should just do that as long as the zoning board is open to the idea of use variance. When they were starting to put together their package for the use variance application, it was just the sentiment of the applicant that there was no way that he'd get over the self-created hardship aspect of the use variance. And so the problem with the first floor residential is that it would require a use variance on the first floor, even though the comprehensive plan and the form-based code regulating plan is pretty clear that, you know, it thinks that that is the right use for that area, that it should be an allowed use as a principal use for structure on that section of the VC district, even though the comprehensive plan is pretty clear on that. The zoning code still says that it's not allowed, and it still requires a use variance. And they just didn't feel like it, you know, it made sense, because the way that the use variance code is written, you can't sort of say, well, it makes sense. You have to not meet any of the thresholds, and that was one that they couldn't overcome. They could not say that it wasn't a self-created hardship. They said, you know, he'd never tried to, you know, it's currently being rented as a retail space. It's not like he can't rent it as retail space. He just thinks it works better as residential space. So,
and in terms of variances using the form-based, like how far has it gotten in the analysis of what form-based variances it would require?
Yeah, so we left it at that point. We kind of left it with BFJ. I left it with BFJ last week. So it's sitting in their hands right now. They're going to do their verification of the list of the variances they need. And so the expectation is that at the next meeting, we'll have at the next full meeting, I guess, we'll have an understanding of what those variances are, and you can do the referral at that point to the ZBA.
I mean, I'm a little confused, because I thought this area was in the overlay district where first floor residential was allowed on the comprehensive plan that we just finished and completed, what, like 6 months ago, right? Wasn't that part of the overlay district?
Yeah, but yes, but the overlay district has other elements to it. So that the way that the overlay district works, there's all these other, you know, requirements that you have to follow. So you have to, you know, you can still run into situations where you need variances from code, strict interpretation from the code. So just because it's a form-based code doesn't mean that you won't need variances.
Does he have to prove that commercial is a hindrance to attain? And no, he doesn't.
No, that he won't. So the first floor residential, he won't have to prove. He'll just have to say that's what he's proposing. He's proposing under the form-based code. But there are other elements that he will have to likely get variances for, but we don't have that list right now.
To be clear, just so we're 100% clear, you only get first floor residential as of right if you use the form-based code. It's still not permitted as of right if you're just going in and using the baseline VC district zoning. So if you're not using the form-based, you don't get the benefit of that new change. That's why this is a problem.
Right, and in this case, you know, without the form-based, they would require a use variance. And by going form-based, it's more likely that they would require some sort of an area variance related to the build-to wall or some of the other components of the form-based code.
Correct. I mean, one of the things that under the VC district, they would have required an area variance for the 5th story. Under the form-based code, they don't require an area variance. They require a special permit for that 5th floor. Right. So the sort of the path to getting an approval is a little different, which is why we're getting help from BFJ on this.
Okay. So I guess we can bring JB in if he just wants to kind of give us a brief overview of where they are with the project, what they're trying to get out with this form-based proposal.
Okay. We have JB and we have also Peter Chernoff here.
Okay, great.
All right, JB, you're here, and so are you, Peter.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you feeling okay there, JB?
Not really, but it's okay.
I heard you were in a hospital, man.
Oh no!
I hope you're not calling us from the hospital bed.
Oh my God.
I'm actually am, but I just wanted to make sure that if I can share the screen and kind of quickly walk you through what the narrative that we put together, so we can.
Yeah, let me take off my sharing, and JB's getting sympathy points today. All right, go ahead.
Now I need to find my there. Okay. when we put this together and we wanted to go with the base code, we kind of provided a narrative for the board, showing the steps that we follow and why we feel that the form-based code fits our project. So this is where the original map with the approved law. This is our site, and the blue line determines what is called or how it's regulated. So we're under the neighborhood commercial street frontage, and that brings us to the requirements. We need to have 15 feet to the curb from the building, and we need to have a minimum 8-foot sidewalk. Also, that district allows us to have 5 stories or 58 feet. So also we point out in our memo that under the form-based code, some of these new requirements imposed or some of the zoning regulation or bulk regulations, the planning board has the authority to grant modification if they see that fit with the project. So then this is a view. This our building is 4 stories from Croton Avenue. The reason that we needed 5 stories is because of the slope in the back, and it's actually 5 stories in the back, but in the front it'd be 4 stories. The sidewalk, we are now 15 feet away from the curb. We are 13.83, so we shy a foot or having the 15 feet. But in this case, since the building is existing and aligns with our building, I believe that that's a modification that the board can grant. So when we put the zoning analysis for the BC zone, and then what is required in the form-based code, the one thing that we will need, there are 2 items. It will be the minimum front yard or the minimum separation to the curb, which is supposed to be 15, and we have 13.83. And in actuality, under the form-based code, is not 100% coverage for building or impervious area. It's 80 and 50. So we will need about 4% variance. And again, under the new law, the board is allowed to grant that. Then as we go along, part of the law, like it was indicated, is that residential use should be allowed on all floors. So that's what we're trying to use here as well. And as well in the narrative, we were showing the board that there was concerns. We are finishing the rendering, but should wanted to point out that there were some concerns about the views from Highland. This is what you view from Highland. This is City Hall, the library, and our site. As you can tell, even in winter views, it's very hidden. And then with summer views, is totally hidden. Then we did provide the board as well on the memo, how we planning to do the work, methods of doing the work, access, where we're putting the dumpster, and how we utilize it. So this is a doable project. And as I mentioned before that, all the components for the parking waiver are here. That was basically what we wanted to say in a narrative.
And so from the parking end, that's also, would that be a waiver application regardless of whether this was a use variance or the
Yes.
Yeah.
It would definitely be it's a waiver.
Yeah, we went through at a previous meeting. Keller Sessions has already done their analysis, wherein they showed that our proposed use actually would have less of a parking requirement than the existing use because of the additional parking requirements of a commercial use.
But there is no current waiver in effect for the property, correct?
Well, the property presently has no zone.
There's no parking waiver. There was never a parking waiver granted on record for this property.
There's, I think there's an adjacent lot, like the current parking for that property was.
So let's like briefly get into that so that we can at least make sense of that. So
Yeah.
there's the practical use of the lot across the street for this property, which there is a longstanding understanding, at least from the village and the previous property owner, that would be used. However, there's nothing on record, either via site plan or anything else that we could find, and we did look. There's nothing on record that connects those two. There's no existing restrictive covenant that we could find. So we investigated that, and even though it's been sort of used that way from a practical standpoint, there's no formal agreement other than there was common ownership in the past, and there's currently common ownership. And it was kind of used that way for that building, but also I think other properties in that area, not just this one. So.
And I believe that when we went in front of the board, we did discuss and go through with the staff and the board as well. And we met all the components of the parking waiver, which it was loosen. The demand is lesser than the current demand. That we not loosen any parking due to the addition, and any available parking remains unchanged. So the neighborhood, we're not making any changes to the parking in the neighborhood. And those are the three items under 270-3012.
So from the perspective of
There's 4 items.
right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that at some point, once you get ready to start thinking about the parking waiver, you're probably going to want to, go through the factors and go through the steps and evaluate them individually. But, I think it's notable that we can compare this, application a little bit to like the Goldfish property, the restaurant down, I think on Rockledge, where it was a similar situation where you had a building and you had a parking lot across the street. There's common ownership, but there's also an existing site plan that had been approved in the past that had the parking there. So they were sort of connected in that way via a site plan that we can't, there's no such approval on our records of anything like that here.
So from the records that the village has, this is a building without parking.
And it's already currently a 2-family property or 2 apartments and a commercial on the ground level, right? And there's no parking waiver already on place, but it's currently used as what it is now, 2 apartments and commercial, right? So what's the increase in parking needed now compared to what it is currently?
So the sort of setting aside demand, which is like a different kind of a question, the parking requirements for a commercial space plus residential, the combined requirement under the code, I don't know off the top of my head, but I want to say it was like 11 spaces, and the new one I think is 8, but I'm not sure if that number is correct. I have to pull it back up, but
it's less than.
I think
it's less now than it used to be.
Yeah, there's a Keller Sessions memo on that someplace. I don't remember it all.
Yeah, Joe, do you have that?
In 10.
It was 10?
Yeah, I think the resulting count is 10, which is less than what's currently required.
So it's a less parking needed and it's no waiver on record now and it's currently existing. So, okay.
Right.
Got it.
So that's one of the questions that I think you're going to have to answer. But, what you do have is obviously there's a project here in front of you that I believe is going to require, it's going to require some discussion about this stuff. We need to, we need to wait, I think, a little bit until we get that PFJ memo before we can give you any guidance as to when to start thinking about like the full extent of this, because I don't know how this impacts the form-based code. And I'd say give us a week or two before, so we can get that in hand and we'll get that out to you. And we can discuss it then. But if you want, you can sort of start looking at the factors, at least the 3 questions you need to ask. And if there's any more, questions or data that you'd like to get from the applicant, definitely.
Well, I mean, one question that I have is, again, so I don't, have we done this is a special permit for the 5th floor? It's a special permit, but it's got to be granted by the Board of Trustees. But the Board of Trustees, gotcha. Wasn't sure if that was, so that's an variance, got it. And so what's the time frame of that relative to, I'm assuming that would need to be granted before we complete our review, or how does that?
Yeah, I mean, so once we get the BFJ stuff back, we're I think what we'll do is we're gonna meet with Corp Council and kind of go over how to get it on their agenda. I can't give you a good time frame because their process is a little different than ours. And I'm not sure whether that special permit requires a public hearing or not. So, but I would assume it's sort of like in the same kind of time frame that it takes to get a zoning variance, which they, based off of the conversations with BFJ, they'll probably need as well. So,
Yeah, I think it would be a little preliminary to start to be worrying about the parking waiver right now. I think that there probably will need to be a public hearing related to the special permit. So let's just sit tight until we get that BFJ memo, like Jaime said.
Agreed. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board on this project while we have their team here?
Not currently. Wait till we get the memo.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, feel better, JB. Thanks for joining us.
seriously, JB,
Yes,
Yeah.
better, man.
Take care.
Yeah.
JB.
get better, man. Seriously.
A double time tonight, right, Peter?
2.5.
Hazard pay.
All
There
right,
is.
Feel better, JB.
feel better. Thanks,
The
guys.
hospital's
Yeah.
billing me for the internet.
Mm.
Well, JB.
All right.
All right.
Well, Peter, I'm gonna move you back into the.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're gonna move forward on the agenda to 136 1 through 140 Croton Avenue. So I guess at this point we have a couple of recusals. So
Yep, I will recuse
Michael and
myself.
Eric.
Yes, I'm recusing myself too.
Have a good evening, everybody.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
I should know we do have a new person who's supposed to be here today, but I don't know if she was able to get in. Her name is Carla. She's Carla. I can't remember her last name. I apologize. So there's a new alternate to the planning board.
Okay.
So Seth, I think you were CC'd on the email.
It's possible I have not. looked at
Yesterday.
anything yet. Oh, no.
It was yesterday afternoon. So
Okay.
so you may not have seen it yet. So
I did not. I apologize.
she's in Sao Paulo right now though. So
Okay.
she may or may not be able to get a good connection.
Okay. So that's exciting, and we'll look forward to introducing her maybe in our next meeting, which I know I missed the beginning of the conversation before you guys got started, which will be at the Rodriguez Center.
Most
Oh
likely,
yeah, the
That's full meeting.
armory. The armory, yeah. I've never called it the Rodriguez Center before, but
That's all right. I don't know. That's what it says on the sign. That's
that's
nice.
very formal. Yes.
Isn't it the John Paul Rodriguez Operations Center or something?
It didn't. Yeah, it is.
I shortened it a little.
Good job.
No, it's yeah, that's right.
So cool. Anyway, all right. So I think we can get into Jaime, if you want to kind of lay the land here, and we can kind of start this conversation.
Yes. All right. So so we have today, like, there's obviously, it's a big project, right? We got a lot to talk about today. So I want to try to see if we can focus in on the chunks that what we're trying to get accomplished today. I think as staff, what we're hoping to get accomplished today. And so seeker is kind of the first big item that really needs to be tackled before any of the boards can do anything. What we have right now is a lot of information that's been submitted to the planning board. So the goal for tonight is to try to get through the part 2 as much as we can. And so there's kind of an end goal here. We're going to go through the questions, but the end goal for each one of these questions is to really get a decision about either on one end, it's not going to be an impact. On the other end, it could be an impact, but there are mitigating factors that we want to have identified that would go into a neg deck, or on the third end, third possibility is that it is a significant impact and there's no mitigation to be done. It needs to be paused, to move to EIS. You know, those are the decisions you have to make here. The alternate to all of those three is that you just don't have enough information yet to make a decision. You know, I think from staff's perspective, we felt pretty comfortable that you do have enough information here to make a decision on these points. So the goal is to really try to get you to make a decision at that point. After the part 2 is done, we as staff would have to go back, primarily Amanda's got to work on developing the neg deck. We would work on making sure that we filled in any gaps in any questions from the submissions to get it in there. And then once that's done, come back to the planning board, with the draft text of the neg deck so that you can move forward. So, from that perspective, there's no, rush, obviously. If you don't feel like you have enough information tonight, then, we just go back to the applicant. We say, hey, this is the information we need. But there's a lot here, a lot to make a decision. So I think the easiest way to go through it today is to start with identifying the questions that are not really concerns. So the ones where you would be able to click a no on, and then kind of following up with the ones that you'd like to get a little bit more deeply in. I wanted to check with the board to see if everyone got an opportunity to take a look at this tech memo from VHB. This memo, what we did is we asked VHB to prepare a memo of kind of what their opinion was about the part 2. Where and how they think things would be, submitted and interpreted, and all the supplemental materials they had provided to help with making those determinations. This in turn was reviewed by Joe Tremelli and Paul Waddell. They made comments. Those comments got a return memo, and I'm not sure, Joe and Paul, I don't know if y'all really had time to put together a response to their response. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that point, or do you just kind of want to follow it up in line as we're going through it?
Yeah, we did not. So we'll discuss as it comes up.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right. So go ahead.
Yeah, no. So yeah, why don't we jump into those questions? I think what you suggested before is kind of like what are the kind of the easy no's, and we can just kind of, and if it's not an easy no, we can just put a hold button, pull the hold on it, and then we'll come back to those.
Okay, so we'll do that. All right, so impact on land. Proposed action may involve construction on or physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site. So I think that's a yes. We can come back to the specifics of that. Impact on geological features. So the proposed action may result in the modification or destruction of or inhibit access to any unique or unusual landforms on the site, such as cliffs, dunes, minerals, fossils, or caves. So
I don't see any of that there, right?
no,
That should be it.
let's go to the memo. So this is part 1 stuff. Sorry.
Jaime?
Yes.
In the memo, section E.2, I think that's page 13.
Yeah.
There's just a little statement that says there are no rock outcroppings, no unique geological features. That's the only area where I found a note of that.
Okay. All right. So which page? 13, you said?
Page 13 on the
All right.
PDF,
All right.
E.2, E.2.
E.2. Okay.
Natural resources, yeah.
So I think that's a safe no.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So we'll say no. Okay, impacts on surface water. The proposed action may affect one or more wetlands or other surface water bodies, such as streams, rivers, ponds, and lakes. There are no surface water bodies in the area. The closest one that we know about is not a mapped watercourse, but I believe there's some sort of like a tidal, not tidal, tidal. There's some sort of like runoff pond. It's about 400 feet away. I will pull it up and show that to you.
Will the proposed action result in authorized request for question containing just wetland water body shoreline features? No.
So I believe that right around this area, there's kind of like a little drainage thing going on there. Obviously, it's not mapped. We've heard about it from the EAC, but we did measure the distance from the corner of this property to there, and it's about 400 feet. I don't have the GIS map in front of us, but it's it's outside of like the water course buffers. It's outside of the check zone, so it's not the kind of thing that would even show up on our radar. And again, it's not a mapped. It's not even mapped. So even if it was mapped, it would still be outside of like a check zone or anything else. Okay. So
That's a no.
So no. Yeah.
all right. Impact on groundwater. The proposed action may result in new or additional use of groundwater or may have the potential to introduce contaminants to groundwater or an aquifer. Joe Trevelli, I don't know if you and Paul, I love the pipe. I don't know if y'all want to talk a little bit about this. I mean, obviously there's a brownfield issues here. There's the whole thing is going to be, sewered. So maybe talk a little bit about sort of whether or not there's potential impacts for groundwater here.
Yeah, I can try to speak to that. Thank you. So the site has a history of petroleum storage. Looks like there's been automotive repair and petroleum sales. Historically, prior to it being a nursery, there has been soil and groundwater contamination identified in a couple of Phase 2 environmental site assessments that have been performed there thus far. The applicant has applied to the brownfield cleanup program. I understand based on an email that we received just before this meeting that they have been accepted into the program pending the execution of a brownfield cleanup agreement with the DEC. And we can kind of talk a little bit more about what the brownfield program entails at some point later in this discussion. With regard to groundwater, I would say that there is some evidence of groundwater currently being impacted on site. I don't see any record of any off-site investigation to determine off-site groundwater quality. But ultimately, through the brownfield program, remediation will have to be performed for all environmental site media on the site that exceed the state standards, and that includes soil and groundwater, and also soil gas. Although that's not regulated in New York State, there are guidance values for soil gas in New York State. So in a nutshell, I would say that groundwater quality should, under the brownfield cleanup, improve over time. And certainly to get closure in the brownfield program, the groundwater will have to satisfy the state criteria at some point in the future following the remedial process.
So I guess as it pertains to this particular question, I mean, specifically speaking to new or additional use of groundwater, it doesn't sound, based on what you're describing, that that's even really relevant, or that would occur as a result of this intervention.
I don't think use of groundwater is relevant in this case. I think the following statement, or may have the potential to introduce contaminants to groundwater or an aquifer. I think the contaminants are already there. I don't think the cleanup or the development activity stands the potential of introducing any additional contaminants to groundwater.
And that's what we should care about the most, whether new contaminants get into the groundwater that's already existing. Okay.
Right. I think that's the thrust of this particular item on part 2, whether or not additional contaminants will be introduced to groundwater. And I think in this case, it's a no.
Right. So the idea is that this project wouldn't be, introducing contaminants, because there are contaminants already present, and the project will be designed to eliminate those contaminants.
Correct. Correct.
So the net effect is less contaminants in the area with the brownfield, obviously. Okay.
And I know this will come up further down on the, on the checklist as well, when we start the brownfield issues.
Correct.
I mean, board members, I mean, this should be a conversation with all of us. I mean, I think there's a nuance in that response, because it's a brownfield site, but to be, I think based on kind of Paul's explanation, I'm satisfied that this is a no.
I agree with you, Seth. I think it's a no. I think it's a net positive for the area. Removing the contaminants, that is.
I agree also.
I agree.
I agree as well.
All right,
Sounds good.
then that's a no. Okay. Impact on flooding. So I think I'm gonna hand this over to Joe and Paul again here, because it's a pretty big site that has, it is largely built up now, but I think there is an increase in impervious surface here. Obviously, they've done some things to the site in proposal to manage any sort of extra waterway by tying into, the existing infrastructure. So
This is going to be all blacktop now, right? If the site goes through, so it's going to be much more impervious than what's currently existing, right?
it's actually largely in blacktop now.
Okay.
It is I think it's gonna be an increase, but not a massive increase.
But should we stick to the question in that's being posed, which is there going to be developed on lands that are subject to flooding, right? So is this site subject to flooding?
Yeah, is it in an AE flood zone or not, right? That should be the question there. Is it? I don't think it is.
Is this gonna?
So it's not, no.
It's not in a flood zone.
That's a no.
I'm gonna take you down to some of these questions, like just playing through the questions a little bit. This one question here is: the proposed action may result in or require modification of existing drainage patterns. And so there is some changes. I don't know that it's what would be considered significant. I don't know actually if there's any existing tie-ins to the drains right now. I think they're all just shooting off into Croton Avenue, and in the future they're going to be tied into the storm system. So it's actually improving the conditions in that sense. But that's why I kind of want to get the engineers to talk a little bit about that.
Right now, the site, any stormwater runoff simply sheets off the site out to Croton Avenue. The proposed plan includes a green roof for stormwater quality treatment and some other stormwater improvements around the site, collection and conveyance systems to collect, manage, and control the runoff from the site. So while I guess, technically it is a modification to existing drainage patterns, I would consider it a small impact, and it would be mitigated by the implementation of the SWIP. And I think, if memory serves, it's a negligible increase actually in impervious coverage when you compare pre and post developed scenarios. The landscape buffer at the rear of the building, I think that largely offset any net increase that could have occurred. So it's a fairly close one-to-one from an impervious coverage standpoint.
And it is both outside of the 100 and 500-year floodplains as well. I just checked, so.
Yeah, so you can see here the impervious coverage is proposed to be less than 80, so it falls under the threshold of what's allowed. So there's no variances associated with the impervious coverage. The existing conditions, they don't have it like fully detailed here, but it's less than 80% now. So it is, as you mentioned, it's an increase for sure, but because of the nature of how it was laid out before, there was a lot of parking. There was a lot of spaces where it was hardscaped. So
actually, I may just looking through my memo, I noted in the comment number 11 of our last memo, their SWIP actually demonstrates a 17% reduction in impervious coverage compared to existing conditions. So,
Okay.
So they're reducing impervious coverage, which is going to thereby reduce runoff from the site, and they're also collecting and treating it, providing water quality, which doesn't exist today. So I think from a stormwater standpoint, it's a net benefit, but I guess, technically in answering that question D, again, I would think it would be no or small impact, and it's mitigated by the SWIP.
yeah, so I think that I think it would be wise to just note where you need to do a little bit more of the answering on the questions where you think you might need to answer. Just say yes, and then go through and say no, similar to how we've done in the past. So some of these are, clearly a no. It's not in a designated floodway. It's not in a 100-year floodplain. It's not in a 500-year floodplain. And so the question about the proposed action may result in or require modification of existing drainage patterns. And the answer here is no or small impact may occur, or moderate to large impact may occur. So.
And Joe used the term negligible in terms of describing that. So. Yeah.
So do you want to go with no then? Is the board in agreement?
I would say no. I think we should hear from the board though.
I'm in agreement too. Joe just said it's a net benefit, so I'm in agreement.
Me too.
Yeah, me as well.
That sounds like a no.
I think, yeah, Isabel, I was just waiting to hear from Isabel.
Sorry, I said I agree. It's a no.
Oh, okay.
We'll hear from her.
That makes sense. Also looking at the workbook, which says land subject to flooding can include lands in a floodway or floodplain, lands in the wetlands or in areas where water table is less than 3 feet, and lands where development will change drainage patterns so as to create the potential for flooding.
This is none of that, right? No.
I don't know about the water table.
We don't know what the water table is, but
everything else it seems like is a no.
I think we're being very cautious by checking yes on this box. I think we could probably have checked no, but we're doing the right thing and going through the list and
Yeah, I think you could probably check no at the top.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you want me to go back to the no? All right.
No, I think I don't know. I mean,
if everything else is a no under the main no, then
yeah,
I think
no is a
supersedes up. Yeah, no's the answer.
Okay, it's fine. We're recording this, so we got it all on the record. Conversation took place. So that was the key.
No, we did proper DD there. We went through it all.
Yeah. Okay.
And drainage, I think, does come up elsewhere on this as well. So it's well covered in this list.
Okay, so impacts on air. The proposed action may include a state regulated air emission source. I think you can just say no here.
Yeah.
Do we, just before we leave that, Paul, I don't know, but as part of the brownfield cleanup, if there is a soil vapor component that needs to be considered, does that qualify under this question, or is that something different?
I don't believe it does, Joe. I think an air emission source is typically a source that's associated with some kind of manufacturing process, or perhaps, you know, an active vapor remediation system or something along those lines. I think it's pretty unusual to have a development of this nature that would be an emission source.
That sounds like a clear no to me.
Yep.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agree.
All right. Impact on plants and animals. Well, it is resulting in a loss of flora from the nursery, which had lots of plants on it.
You knew someone was going to say that.
They, you know, sorry, it was just, the joke is right there. It's just right there. So, you know, there's, this is something I really would like to hear from folks. So there are some sort of like trees on the site. There's kind of scrubby weeds. They're not particularly nice. They have proposed replacing, you know, all those trees, removing those and putting in a hedge of arborvitaes, green giant arborvitaes on the site, which, you know, I don't believe there are any what would be considered specimen trees over there now. So it's not like there's any nice flower. So the question here, which we have not really dug into, is whether or not they need a tree permit to remove those trees. I honestly don't know. I do know that they're putting in a lot more than they're taking out. And in discussions, not about this project, but about green giant arborvitaes in general, I mean, they are conifer trees, right? So they are trees. They're certainly putting in more than they're taking out, anecdotally, but we haven't asked them to verify that. And you know, I'm not sure how the board feels about a full hedge of arborvitae, or if there's any desire to have a broader discussion about that. That's kind of the bulk of the vegetation in the building, other than I think some vegetation they're gonna have in the front of the building. So.
Oh, there's like two separate questions there, right? Though, because the first is the existing site. There, I mean, you know, very literally, yes, there are plants on the site that are going to go away. So, I mean, from that perspective, it may be a yes, but then we click down. As far as the arborvitae question, I mean, maybe, I don't know if that becomes another impacts, something that we could put conditions in there to look at.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm asking it, because just thinking from the standpoint of, so there's a loss of, you know, plant life over there, whether it's a significant important type of plant life or the presence of plant life. I think this board has expressed in the past that the presence of those plants play an important role in carbon capture, right? So having
the question doesn't ask for substantial or significant plants. It just says
plants, flora,
fauna. It's pretty black and white.
Yeah. So so we can go through these questions, but you know, one of the ways that we dealt with some of the stuff in our other application that we went through this process was looking at, you know, that tree replacement plan, and making sure that it was sort of offsetting the impact of the loss of those trees. And so, you know, there's a proposal in front of you, but we haven't really talked about it. So, so maybe we'll go through the questions first. So number one, proposed action may cause reduction in population or loss of individuals or any threatened or endangered species as listed by New York State or the federal government. So let me just pull up.
The form does say that there are not any plant species or animal species listed.
Okay. All right. All right. I was just trying to find a page here.
Are you in the?
I'm in the I'm in the EAF right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Part 2, part 1.
Are you looking for answers to the mapper?
Yeah.
No, or yeah?
Yes, that's right.
I mean, they didn't attach the results of the mapper to the EAF, did they? The short.
Not to the original one, but they did do
They
it.
followed up with that, didn't they?
They did follow up, yeah.
It's in their technical memo.
Yeah, I'm looking at the memorandum and it says a no response was generated by the NIS DEC EAF mapper tool based with the site's address.
Yeah, in terms of endangered or threatened species.
Correct.
But the mapper is also attached to the end of that memo, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Right there.
There it is. Okay. Yeah. So all right. So that's basically it. So we are not aware of any, and if the mapper says there aren't any, then that's really all we have to go on. So I think that the answer there is no. If everybody is in agreement.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. The proposed action may result in a reduction or degradation of any habitat used by any rare, threatened, and endangered species. Same thing, no.
No.
Proposed action may cause a reduction in population loss of individuals of any species of special concern, conservation need. Same thing, there is a no. Proposed action may result in a reduction or degradation of habitat used by any species of special concern, conservation. That's a no.
No.
Proposed action may diminish the capacity of registered natural landmark to support the biological community was established with effect. Answer is no. Proposed action may result in the removal or ground disturbance of any portion of designated significant natural community. No. The answer is no. Proposed action may substantially interfere with nesting, breeding, foraging, or overwintering habitat for the predominant species that occupy the use of the project site. I think it's no. Proposed action requires conversion of more than 10 acres of forest. That's no. And the proposed action, commercial, industrial, or recreational projects only involves the use of herbicides or pesticides, and it's not any of those things. It's not commercial, industrial, or recreational. So I mean, all of the answers here are no. It does result obviously in the loss of flora fauna, so it doesn't meet any of the criteria there. We do have the other impacts. So this is where I think you may want to note that, there is going to be the loss of some trees.
Yeah, I think we should make sure that that's noted. And if we need to do a tree permit or any tree replacement plan, that would be part of a site plan resolution.
Which will be replaced by giant.
Could I suggest that we don't specify what it's going to be replaced by? Like just say, that the applicant is saying they're going to replace the trees.
On site?
Yeah. Because,
yeah,
my preference would be not arborvitae green giant. It's not a great habitat. It's doesn't do much for anything. It's not, strictly speaking, native. I think they could do better.
Right. I think there will be a balance to be met as we have that conversation with screening and kind of growth rate and all of that. But I agree that with this resolution, there's no reason for us to specify the species.
Yeah, and I think, the applicant is here, so this could be one of those questions that you can kind of come back to them at the end of this. I think that they would prefer to have some indication from the board if this is not, preferred, if there are some ideas around what might be preferred, and that way they can respond to that within the next few days to get something turned around and back to the board. So I think that the revision deadline is actually Monday, so they're going to want to, turn something around pretty quickly. I think that with that in mind, there's going to be some trees lost on site. They look to replace those on site. So I think, you can probably say a no here. It's a no or moderate impact.
Correct.
But I defer to the board here.
I agree.
I agree.
Yeah, I always hesitate because you're taking out bigger trees, you're putting in something smaller. If they are looking at hedging, it's not really, doing the same, not giving the same benefits. But in this instance, It's not,
I'm not sure how
I don't
big,
know how many trees there are there. I haven't had a good look at it. So
Yeah.
I would think it's also probably a small impact.
yeah, you can kind of see here. I mean, these are the types of trees that they have here.
Yeah, it's a pretty cleared out site as it is. you know?
They're not huge trees, and I'm not sure how many of those are actually even on their site.
I
would
think
assume
they're
that most
all
of them
on,
are.
yeah, I think they're all on their side,
Yeah,
I think.
I think you're probably
But-
right. Yeah. Those
but-
houses are right up on the property line, so.
Yeah,
We would review this the way we would any other with, review the
Yeah.
trees today, figure out what the DVH is currently there and
yeah.
look to replace that in kind on the site.
Okay, all right, so then we can, let me add something here. Tree permits. Needed to that replaces DBH of native trees. Places native trees.
So is that in the code that it only is native trees to be replaced?
No, so strictly speaking, it's not in the code. So you have the flexibility of saying that they don't have to do anything, or they have to do everything.
Yeah, I just don't see why we specify native trees necessarily, because they may well not even replace them with native trees, because that's not in the code either, that it has to be native, right?
No,
And
but
they're probably looking at conifers.
it does not say that they have to replace them with native trees. I will say that there is, there's a stated desire, I think, by the EAC, and I'm not sure if it's like written anywhere in the code. I feel like there's somewhere in the code that talks about the use of native plants.
Right, it's preferable, yeah.
Yeah, as a preference for native plants. I can't remember where in the code I read that.
I feel like we need to be consistent, and I think, we've had other projects where we've counted DBH for everything that is on that site, regardless of species or whether it's native. Right?
Mhm.
So I just think we need to be consistent. I don't think we can chop and change.
I mean, how specific do we need to get at this point in this analysis, right? I mean, this review, DBH of,
Well, just DBH of existing trees.
Well, I think that,
Yeah.
so like, as stated at the beginning of this conversation, there's like sort of a couple of ways you can go. You either have a question that you've got an answer to, or you need more information. And so I don't think you need to make a decision about how you're going to treat the DBH of native or non-native plants. I don't even know if any of these are native or non-native or whatever.
No, I have no idea either.
They could be all native for all we know. So
Or they could
what
be all
you
Norway
consistently said
maples.
is you need a tree survey. So I
Right.
think you need that.
yeah.
Yeah, so let's
So-
just be general and just say that for now.
I mean, but even in here, we could say replaces the DBH of trees on site to the satisfaction of the planning board. I mean, then we can work out however else we want to discuss, native, non-native, naturalized.
Okay, so all right, so let me fix that then. Okay, so I'll say here, tree permit needed.
And you could just say tree permit needed. I mean, that,
Yeah, well, that's what I'm just gonna write to the satisfaction of the planning board.
there you go.
It's not letting me write.
Yeah, and just keep it very general. I agree with you. It should be just general at this point.
I apologize, my computer is acting funny. Why is it doing?
Knows everybody's watching it.
It does, it's just, it's making fun of me. They're all gonna laugh at you,
Adam Sandler, yes, I get it.
It doesn't want you to get specific, clearly.
Jesus.
Tree permit. We'll leave
That's it.
All right, well,
All right, so yeah, Amanda and Joe, y'all are taking notes on this, right? You got that?
Yeah, I think we got the gist of it.
All right, let's keep moving.
All right.
Your
Moving right
computer's
along.
had enough of that question.
It's not enough of me, probably, you know. Impact on agricultural resources. The proposed action may impact agricultural resources. So,
Well, that sounds like a no, doesn't it?
I mean, there was a nursery there, so I don't know.
But it's not there now.
It's
I mean,
not.
it's already gone.
They might have had like tomato plants, you know, or
I think this
Alright,
one's an
alright.
easy no.
jalapenos, you
Get it
know.
wrong, guys. It's an easy one.
Aesthetic resources,
Easy now.
aesthetic resources. That was a no. to be
Impact
clear.
aesthetic resources, that's a no, yeah. All right. Impact on historic and archaeological resources. Let me just go back and check.
You check the mapper.
Yes. Data are not available or are incomplete. Refer to EAF workbook.
I mean, what's the distance to, it was the only resource in that area that I could think of would be the cemetery, but that's pretty far down the road. And I don't even know if that qualifies as a historic resource based on.
All right, so let's just
Let's look at
go
one.
through it. Let's go through the questions, right? So the proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to any buildings, archaeological site or district which is listed in the National State Register of Historic Places, or that has been determined by the Commissioner of the New York State Office of Parks. So that's a no. We would know that on the map.
Right.
And there's nothing local there, so that's a no. The proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to an area designated as sensitive for archaeological sites on the New York State Historic Preservation Archaeological Site Survey. And I mean, that's a no. It says
We're not
archaeological
aware of
sites.
that.
Well, it says archaeological sites, yes, here. So let's go to their technical memo, E3F.
So it was a yes, yeah, there's a response there. It says, while the mapper tool indicated the site was archaeological sensitive based on the site's address, a no response was manually selected. Oh, because this is their response.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because I couldn't find anything.
I mean, I'm on the SHPO site now, and it actually indicates that the building on site, the existing building that was there is it's not eligible. If that's worth anything, and I just want to take a look. It is looks like the southwest corner of the property is just clipped by the boundaries of the archaeologically sensitive area layer.
Does it say what that layer is? And
Do you want to share your screen?
Sure. Let's see. Okay. Can everybody see that?
yeah, there we go. Yes.
So this is the site. And if I select this, it's the building's obviously not there anymore, but when it was listed as not eligible for historic structures. And this boundary here, this darker shading, is the boundary of the archaeologically sensitive area, which is everything to the west. So it just clips the property here in this corner.
Is there a way to
So-
zoom in more, Joe?
Sure.
What is the archaeological sensitive thing that, is it just the age and the historic properties?
I think that's the archaeologically sensitive area is more of a broad brush. You know, it's a kind of like an elevated, give this property a look before you do anything type of indicator, right? And then you delve in on the site specific locations and look for eligibility. And this one was, when it was a building, was not eligible. The site's vacant right now. So
So this tool would be, I mean, I'm just trying to think of the purpose of this area would be to say, all right, we're doing work on this site, there's a structure here, and it might be, you know, this might be a historic building that's worthy of preservation or.
Well, I think what you're saying is that all that Chippo's saying is like, stop and take a look to see if there's any archaeological sensitive stuff on the site or near the site, which there's nothing identified. And upon further review, I think the board is pretty familiar with the area now. So I guess the question is, does the board feel that there's anything adjacent to the site that is archaeologically significant or needs to be investigated?
The site itself is vacant at this point, and it's been previously developed. So, you know, from a, you know, the standpoint of historic nature and preservation, you know, that there's nothing there to preserve at this point. And if there was anything, it's already been disturbed, right? So the site, it's been developed, it's been raised.
So the answer is no.
I would think.
Well, so yeah, probably. But I'm going to add this to this. I think the new building, just based off of looking at the footprint of where the old building footprints were, I mean, the new building is farther away from the property line than the old building was. The structures were, but so even if you consider that, you know, is it closer or farther away from some of these homes in that block? It's farther away, so.
And Joe, tell me if I'm wrong in terms of my interpretation of this. We're not worried about, you know, digging up, you know, some, you know, buried something or other. Is really looking at kind of, you know, building structures, you know, things that are on the site that might be worthy of preservation. And in this case, this is a paved. I mean, maybe I'm interpreting it.
Yeah. It could, how's the question actually read again, Jaime?
Pull it up and I'll show you. It says, and let me move this. So the proposed action may occur in or adjacent to historic archaeological resources. The top line question. This question is proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to an area designated as sensitive for archaeological sites on the New York State Historic Preservation Archaeological Site Survey. So it is contiguous, but the question then becomes, is it going to have a impact on that area? So maybe this is an opportunity to pull up the workbook, Amanda, you think?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. All right. So these are the questions they say that you should ask to see if you even need to do the further evaluation in the sub questions. These three questions. Do you want me to read them out?
Please.
Does the project site contain or is it substantially contiguous to any buildings, archaeological site or district which is listed in the National or State Register of Historic Places, or that it's been determined by the Commissioner of New York State Office Parks, Recreation and Historic Preservation to be eligible for listing on the State Register of Historic Places? Does the project site contain or is it contiguous with an area designated as sensitive for archaeological sites? Or does the project site contain or is it contiguous with a known archaeological site, even though it may not be included on the New York SHPO inventory?
So I think the second one is a yes.
Correct. Agreed.
The third one is a no, and the first one is a no.
The answer to
Right.
any of these questions is yes, then you need to check the overall yes and go to the sub questions.
Right. Which is what we're doing.
Yep. So then, is this the one that we were hung up on?
Correct.
Okay. So did we already look at this part of the part one?
I think actually the question that we're on is the B, 10B.
B, okay.
Yep.
So 10A was a no.
Of the sensitive area, correct. Right.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Right. So,
this is
yeah,
interesting. Okay, sorry, I should have scrolled down. Are there any areas designated as sensitive archaeological sites within or contiguous with the proposed project location? There are areas, but there are not any sites, right?
right.
Has there been a phase 1, 2, or 3? There have been phase 1 and 2 studies done, but environmental, did they include archaeological information? I don't think so.
I don't remember.
I don't
You're
think they,
talking about the environmental site assessments, the answer is no.
Right, okay. Will there be any disturbance of the archaeological resource? And so these are the questions we answer that. Will it affect the physical integrity of the site? Will it restrict any existing public access to the site? Will it obstruct the view of the site? Will it alter any access to the site for purposes of, I think these are all.
These don't seem relevant to the site and its adjacency to this sensitive area.
So all right, so here's the question. So you got a couple of ways that you can go about this. You can say, number one, you could do a phase 1. You could ask for a phase 1 archaeological. Keep in mind that this site has already been built on. And so you're sort of building on an existing built site. It's not a large site with a bunch of undeveloped areas that haven't been disturbed before. So you're talking about doing something, and it's a known brownfield that has to have the soil removed on top of everything else.
Right.
So you if you wanted to, you can ask for a phase 1 archaeological if you think it's necessary.
Jaime, before we do
Yeah.
that, as part of the SWIP, because it is in an archaeologically sensitive area, they would need to submit an application to SHPO for their evaluation. They may just do that and SHPO comes back and says, you know, they close the loop, it's done, there's nothing to worry about here. Or they come back and say they either need more information or they want a phase 1 done. But it could be as simple as requiring, well, they need to do that anyway. They make that application to SHPO, they come back with a response.
Okay.
My
I
gut
would
is-
like, at this point, because I think this is a question that we should probably go back to VHB and ask them. They may have already reached out to SHPO about this issue. So I don't know. If we want, you can come back to this question along with the other ones and sort of keep moving along to the other ones.
Okay. Can I did we just automatically say that the aesthetic impacts was a no? Because I know that one in the past, we've said there's no aesthetic impact on the site, but it's kind of like worded funny. Can we just make sure that's 100% a no?
Yes, we can.
So to be clear, as we're walking away from this, so we're gonna what are we asking for here?
I think we wait for 10 and if the applicant's here, I think you might want to let the applicant come in.
Okay.
See if they've spoken to SHPO. So let's just wait, come back to that question.
Sounds good.
So let's go back to 9 and have that discussion here. So the question here is, the land use of the proposed action are obviously different from or are in sharp contrast to current land use patterns between the proposed project and a scenic or aesthetic resource. And so I did kind of quickly say no to that. I'm gonna go back to the EAF here. Can y'all see, is there like a big black box on your side, or are you able to see it? Because I can see screen thing. I just want to make sure I'm not blocking what you can see.
Let's just make sure there's no designated aesthetic resource.
Yeah, so the comment from VHB was here, Um,
So
Apology, I'm just, yeah, if you know where to go, then let me know.
it's E3H. There, they said they manually selected no based on review of the New York State Scenic Byways map and the New York State Department of State Division of Coastal Resources and Waterfront revitalization scenic areas of statewide significance. I don't know why the mapper doesn't come up with an answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the only, when we were going through this with the other project, I believe the only scenic historic, aesthetic resource was the Hudson River.
Yeah, you're right.
That's my recollection.
Yep, and it does.
I'm pretty sure that's within 5 miles, but I mean, it's not close enough. I don't think to have any sort of impact on.
Yeah, it's definitely within 5 miles, but it's not visible from this site. It's not kind of present on the site.
Okay. It's also zoning compliant from a land use perspective. So there's no use variance associated with their proposing. It's directly across the street from another project which has retail on the bottom and commercial and residential above. There's height and story variances, but that's not a land use question. If we go through this without checking it off and ask the questions, proposed action may be visible from any officially designated federal, state, local scenic or aesthetic resource, that'd be no. Proposed action may result in the obstruction, elimination, or significant screening of one or more officially designated scenic views, and to no. Proposed action may be visible from publicly accessible vantage points, to no. Situation or activity in which viewers are engaged while viewing the proposed action, routine travel for work, recreational. So again, it's not blocking anything. Proposed action may cause a diminishment of the public enjoyment and appreciation of the designated aesthetic resource. It's not blocking it. And there are similar projects within the following distance of the proposed project. I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, there's a project right across the street from it. So
I think we could identify projects at all. Certainly the first two would be the most relevant.
And right on Main Street,
5 miles.
5 miles, right on Main Street.
Yeah.
Everything.
well, no, I mean, right, literally across the street.
Yeah.
There's a mixed use project. So
We'll start from, yeah, okay.
So I mean, I think it's if y'all are comfortable, I think you can check no here.
Yeah,
Agreed.
again, this to me, this question specifically speaks to these scenic resources, the aesthetic resources, which are not relevant to this site. I think there are other questions to speak to, neighborhood and related issues, but not in number 9 here.
No, and thank you for just humoring me and going through that.
Sure. No,
Just
thank you
wanted to
for-
make sure.
Okay, so impact on open space and recreation. The proposed action may result in a loss of recreational opportunities or reduction of an open space resource as designated in any adopted municipal open space plan. The second question is definitely a no. There is no open space, municipal open space plan that has this designated as open space. And the first question, the proposed action may result in a loss of recreational opportunities. As far as I know, this has not ever been used that way.
It's a private site that's been boarded up with no access to it.
So I
This
think
is
that's
a clear no, yeah.
no.
An existing site. Yeah.
Yeah,
enough.
the impact on critical environmental areas. The proposed action may be located within or adjacent to a critical environmental area. I think that the Hudson Valley is, considered a critical environmental area. I don't know where the borderline ends. Let's go to this. So they're saying no here, just for verification purposes. We'll go to Westchester County. Alerts, features.
I mean, it looks like they're outside of it. I could share my screen. If you
Yeah.
like.
Okay. Yeah. If you could, yeah, I will stop sharing. But I think it was Highland Avenue, but I just wanted to verify that. Go ahead.
Okay. So our site is up here to the right of the screen, and the magenta is the limit of the CEA, which is Highland Avenue.
Mhm.
The LWRP, right?
Yeah, it's the LW. Well, yeah, the LWRP covers the CA. So there's, I mean, that's your answer.
Questions?
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen again.
Yeah, I think we're outside the zone, so let's.
You don't want to waste any more time, right?
Technically.
They're getting late already?
Not yet, but
Take shots when you can, right?
Yeah, okay, so. No. All right, impact on transportation. Proposed action may result in, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to click that. A change to existing transportation systems. So, no, I mean, it is actually going to close up a couple of entryways onto the site. It's a different site. There's, there'll be an entry on Prospect and an entry on Watson. There'll be no entry on Croton Avenue.
can we just walk through these questions really quickly? Just because I know
so
traffic has been
projected traffic increase may exceed capacity of the existing road network. That's a no. We've had that looked at by BFJ. They said that it's not going to be an issue for capacity. Proposed action may result in the construction of paved parking area for 500 or more vehicles. That's a no. Proposed action will degrade existing transit access. That's a no. Proposed action will degrade existing pedestrian or bicycle accommodations. That is a no. They're actually going to be, as part of the project, improving sidewalks, not just in front of the site, but around the site, including the work on the ADA accessible ramps onto those sidewalks. And then the proposed action may alter the present pattern of movement of people or goods. And I think that's a no. So I think you can say no here.
I'm comfortable with a no.
Yeah, me too.
I agree.
Impact on energy. The proposed action may cause an increase in the use of any form of energy.
That's gotta be a yes.
Yes, right?
Yeah, big time.
So the proposed action will require a new or an upgrade to an existing substation. Joe and Paul, I think it's a no, right?
Yeah. The existing facilities will serve the site.
The proposed action will require the creation or extension of an energy transmission or supply system to serve more than 50 single or two-family residents, or to serve a commercial or industrial use. That is a no. The proposed action may utilize more than 2,500 megawatt hours per year of electricity.
Deferred on that.
Yeah.
Let me just check here. What does the EAF say? I mean, Joe and Paul, do you want to weigh in on this? I think the answer is no, but
I don't know what 2,500 megawatts looks like.
You know what, maybe we can defer, we can ask the applicant when they come in.
Yeah,
okay, moving on. The proposed action may involve heating and or cooling of more than 100,000 square feet of building area where completed. And the answer there is that yes, it will, but whether it's a moderate to large impact may occur, I don't know. It's right around 100,000. I think it's about 103,000 square feet.
Right, and this is in the context of impact on energy, right? So I think that's the frame of the question.
It is, yeah. So it's right over the threshold.
We haven't really discussed with them their cooling, their plans for cooling and how they're going to do that. So that might be an opportunity for them just to share that with us.
Okay. All right, going on to 15 then, impact on noise, odor, and lights. Proposed action may result in an increase in noise, odors, and outdoor lighting. The answer there is yes. And then the proposed action may produce sound above noise levels established by local regulation. Dave said no, it's not the kind of use that should cause that. We may want to ask if there's going to be any sort of like stuff on the roof that makes noise.
We've also talked about construction mitigation plans during, in the context of noise and light pollution.
Correct.
So,
the proposed action may result in blasting within 1,500 feet of any residence, hospital, school, licensed daycare center, or nursing home. I don't know the answer to that.
you can ask them if they're planning to do any blasting first of all, because
Yeah. Okay, so we can come back to that question then with them. The proposed action may result in routine odors for more than 1 hour per day. Go back and ask them that as well.
Yeah.
The proposed action may result in light shining onto adjoining properties. They did do a lighting plan.
right.
So we have that, and we can pull that up here if you'd like to take a look.
Yeah, let's put that up there if we're going to answer the question.
Okay.
And again, if this doesn't, if it's kind of searching through a bunch of drawings, we are going to ask them to come in a moment. So we can always ask them just pull that right up.
Yeah, I mean,
If it's right here, that's cool.
it's definitely here. It's just there's a lot of information.
I know.
Total recall.
Expect you to know each drawing number and
Yeah.
where to pull it out in an instant, Jaime.
Doesn't everybody? Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to get the applicant
Yeah,
to.
we'll have them pull that up. So I mean, really, this whole
But
section is
definitely
something
they
that
did.
would be helpful
Yeah.
to have them
Okay.
review with us.
All right, so we'll come back on that. Impact on human health. The proposed action may have an impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants.
This is the brownfield question.
Yeah, it's a brownfield question. So Paul, do you want to handle this sort of discussion about the construction and like the methods of construction and how that will be dealt with during the brownfield cleanup?
I haven't read anything with regard to that. I mean, I don't think there's a real plan yet. I can kind of give you a generic overview of what might occur as a part of the remedial process, if that's what you think you need.
Yeah, that might be helpful.
Yeah, so, you know, typically the remediation of a site like this would be concurrent with the construction activity. You would typically break ground and remediate the site in the initial stages of development. My guess is this site, the remediation is going to be focused upon the removal of impacted soils. However, there is the issue of groundwater quality and soil vapor quality, which is not the kind of problem that is fixed with an excavator. And so there may be some residual contamination that either needs short to medium term monitoring to ensure for the state that the problem is attenuating, or perhaps some kind of active remediation, at least in terms of the groundwater quality, whether it be in situ cleanup or something of that nature with chemicals or something like that. I mean, we can go down these items one by one, and I can kind of make comment on how the brownfield program will feed into them.
That'd be great.
I'm having a little trouble reading.
So, yeah.
Okay, let me, I will make it the main show, you know?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Sorry, I got a massive screen here, so it's huge.
Yeah, that's a lot better. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I can't comment upon. Maybe someone else knows the locale better than me.
1,500 feet. I think the closest school would be, I don't know about daycares, or the school would be probably Roosevelt. It's probably more than 1,500 feet.
Well, we have a part one question that leads into this. So E1D, we can pull up. Let me just do that.
Mhm. It was a yes, and it is Roosevelt.
Yeah, so it's within approximately 1,500 feet. Okay. So the answer is that it's within 1,500 feet.
I say given what's being described is that it would not have a major impact, that it would be a smaller no impact.
Okay.
Again, but board members, I can agree or not.
Okay. Do the board members agree?
I also just wanted to, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I agree with that.
I agree.
I agree as well.
I agree as well.
The site of the proposed action is currently undergoing remediation. So E1G and E1H. So have hazardous waste been generated, treated, or disposed on site, or does the project exist? A yes response was manually selected, as the retail gasoline station automotive repair garage were operated on subject property until 1981 and 1996 respectively. And then for E1H, a yes response was auto-generated by the New York State DCEAF mapper tool based on property records associated with site's address. So again, it has had something happen here. However, is the remediation of this site going to cause, a significant environmental impact? Is the remediation is part of the action?
Right. I think the key here is that the applicant's engineer has stated that they're going to pursue a track one cleanup, which under the brownfield program basically means that there will be no restrictions to the use of the property going forward, that the site will meet the unrestricted use soil criteria and meet the groundwater criteria as well for the state. I think the answer to question B, though, is that it's not currently undergoing remediation. I think the simple answer there is no, it's not.
And to
but
Paul's
I think,
point,
go
to
ahead.
Paul's point about the track 1 cleanup, there's more details about that on page 13. So in addition to Paul's points about what generally happens during a cleanup, they have provided some specific, right there, yeah.
That's right.
Specific detail about what the track 1 cleanup.
That's right, yeah, and at some point we can kind of discuss that. I think the point that I wanted to make everybody aware of is that a brownfield cleanup process is not a quick process. There are numerous steps to the process that require various degrees of participation on behalf of the state in terms of review and approval, and also there are various steps that require public participation, including public comment periods on various elements of the applicant's submittals.
Yeah.
Or in this case, under the brownfield program, the applicant is actually called a volunteer. I just,
I believe that some of that public process is already taking place. At least the first part of it has.
Well, to my knowledge, the only thing that's happened with respect to the brownfield program is they've applied to it. And based on the letter that I saw about an hour and a half ago, that their application has been approved. But they've not yet even entered into an agreement with the state.
Okay.
And so, I have kind of an outline here of kind of the steps necessary, and I don't want to go through the whole thing, but there, and VHB actually outlines it as well, as you indicated, but there are things like they have to develop an investigation work plan, they have to perform an investigation, they have to develop a remedial action work plan that describes their actual remediation steps, which is probably the most important element of the process. All these things take time to develop. They take time for approval. They take time for public comment. They take time to respond to public comment if there is any. And so it's a long process. And I think what I'm getting at is a negative declaration, if you choose to determine it to be a negative declaration, has to be contingent upon the successful participation and completion of the brownfield program. That's the only way that these items could be checked as a no, ultimately.
I think that is actually really good advice here. That's the question that I think you need to lay at the feet of the developer and ask them, because that's a condition that they would have to adhere to. The understanding that if they decided to change down the road and not go through the brownfield program because they didn't get accepted into it, they would have to return for seeker. But I think
Right.
that's really good advice. So that's something that maybe we can ask the developer who is here.
Yeah, right. And even in addition to that, the fact that they're seeking right now a track 1 cleanup doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be able to achieve that. They may discover that during the remedial process that there's issues there that have not yet been identified, and they may seek a less stringent cleanup. And how that ultimately impacts seeker will have to be determined. But like you said, they would have to come back to the seeker process under that circumstance.
So it would be a condition not just of successful brownfield completion, but also the track 1 brownfield completion.
Yeah, right now, the items that we might check under the assumption that they're going to achieve a track 1, some of these items may change under a different remedial track.
So, I mean, how do we, we have the applicant here, and would that would be a condition written into any negative declaration if that's ultimately where this were to go?
Exactly. And ultimately, it's the advantage of the town to hold them to a track 1 cleanup for sure.
That's super helpful. Okay. Do we need to check off those boxes now if we're discussing? It's just kind of, we can read through the questions, but it's a funny way of answering it, right? It's a no conditional upon the Almost,
Yeah.
it sounds like all of these would be no's conditional upon the track one remediation.
Right, right.
Okay, all right, so so let's go through the other items in the list then. There's completed emergency spill remediation, completed environmental site remediation on or adjacent to the site of proposed action.
That's a no right now because nothing's
Yeah.
been done yet.
The site of the action is subject to an institutional control limiting the use of the property as an easement or deed restriction.
That's a no right now, and under a track one cleanup, that will continue to be a no, but there are circumstances for other tracks where there's the potential for an institutional or engineering control of the site.
Okay. The site of the action is subject to an institutional control limiting use of the, sorry, the proposed action may affect institutional control measures that were put into place to ensure the site remains protected of the environmental health. That's a no. The proposed action has adequate control measures in place to ensure that future generation treatment or disposal of hazard wastes will be protective of the environment and human health.
That's a no under track one.
Okay. The proposed action involves construction or modification of a solid waste management facility. It's a no. Proposed action may result in the unearthing of solid or hazardous waste. So
That's a
That's-
yes.
the yes.
Yeah, it's part of the remedial process.
Well, the
obviously,
question is
to
whether
unearth.
it's not a yes. It's either a
Well-
no or moderate impact.
I would say that would be moderate because that's the whole goal of the remediation, you know?
Yeah.
I
The
believe
proposed action
it's no or small, right? And then the yes
or
is
small
moderate.
impact. Yeah.
Well, what's the rightmost column?
Moderate to large impact versus no or small impact.
Do you have the workbook handy to see what the threshold is that triggers a
Yeah.
large impact?
Yeah, what number is this again?
Is
14.
16.
16H.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Can you not share and then I can share?
Yes.
Right, so here is H.
Well, you know, in reading this, I would say the remedial action that they're going to propose would not result in a higher risk for spill, leakage, leaching, or emissions of those substances into the environment. It's removing them from the environment. So I think that statement is not applicable to the remedial action in this case.
So then it's a no.
It's a
No
no.
or small.
Okay.
Conditional upon the
Right.
remediation, the phase one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me go and share my screen.
Increasing the rate of disposal.
Okay.
That's a no.
Okay. Proposed action may result in excavation or other disturbance within 2,000 feet of a site used for the disposal of solid or hazardous waste. So no.
No.
Proposed action may result in the migration of explosive gases from a landfill site to adjacent offsite structures. And that's a no.
Correct.
The proposed action may result in the release of contaminated leachate from the project site.
That's a no.
Okay. All right. Are there any other impacts that the planning board should be considering here that they would want to mention?
From an environmental nature, you know, my only thought, there's two comments that I think I'd like to make. And the first is that I believe it's in the VBH memo, they reference the potential to incorporate a vapor barrier in the building design. typically used to mitigate the potential for soil vapor intrusion into the building. I'd like to ask the applicant whether they believe that still satisfies the requirements of a track 1 cleanup. Normally, any kind of a mitigative feature such as that is considered an engineering control. And under normal circumstances, a track 1 cleanup can't have engineering or institutional controls. However, there is a caveat in the regulation that allows for short-term institutional or engineering controls that, for example, would prevent vapor intrusion for a short period of time following the environmental cleanup to protect against the potential for short-term vapors that might still be in the ground that will eventually attenuate. So I just want to make sure, I want to see whether they have a good understanding of that and how the vapor barrier fits in.
Well, let me ask you something, Paul, because that's a good point. The bottom floor is primarily parking. There is sort of like about a third of it is dedicated to community space and commercial space, which is, obviously it's not residential space. Is that a factor? I mean, I'm assuming they wouldn't need a soil vapor inside of a open air parking garage, right? So.
Well, ultimately the upper floors are going to be used for residential. I would like to hear I'd like to hear their goal for what their soil cleanup goal is. Again, a track 1 being kind of an unrestricted use for the property. Yeah. If they were to pursue.
So let's just real quickly, because I'm not sure everybody here understands what unrestricted use means.
Yeah.
What unrestricted use means is essentially that you can use it as residential property or parks, anything like that. You can do a remediation on a property and use it as a park, and it does not require the same level of cleanup as it does for other types of cleanup. So the highest level of cleanup that you would do on a site is one where there's no restricted land uses on it anymore.
And it's even a little bit, it's a little more complicated than that, because the state soil cleanup objectives, they're designed to attain, they're designed to protect not only human health, which is referenced by stating the land use as residential, restricted residential, commercial, or industrial, but also the cleanup is designed to attain environmental protection, specifically protection of groundwater quality. And so the unrestricted use soil standards attain both. You can have circumstances where a party performing remediation may only want to attain restricted residential cleanup, stating that groundwater is not being used, for example, and the cleanup standards are not as stringent, but it requires some kind of an instrument, like a deed restriction or an environmental easement, that preserves the land use only for that purpose, for example, restricted residential. And again, that's an institutional control that really is not in the spirit of a track 1 cleanup. Okay. I don't know if that helps or confuses the matter.
I don't know. Does it help the board understanding what this means now? I apologize. Sometimes people act like they know what's being said, and they're just maybe they don't. So it's always good to check in and make sure.
And it's a complicated subject, and ultimately, I think not enough is known about the site right now. I mean, it's so early in the brownfield process. They're even proposing to do more investigation. So until an investigation is complete to the satisfaction of the state, and they've begun the process of designing a remedial action, it's hard. All we know right now is that they've stated they're seeking a track 1 cleanup. It's a high standard to achieve. It's very optimistic. And, you know, I hope that they can do it. And I think all of these, your negative declaration has to be contingent upon that achievement.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, and you know, everything that we just went through there, it has a big caveat stuck to it, and it's based on what they've represented that they're trying to do. But if there's any, and they're not, that's something that wouldn't be discovered until they start the process, just after the job is started, right? And at that point, if there's an issue or they can't achieve that level of cleanup, then, or you know, the track one cleanup, then we would have to reevaluate the negative declaration.
Correct.
Understood.
Yeah, and I want to just note to the, there's a couple of hands raised from the applicant. You know, just make sure I'm right here, Seth, but you're going to bring them in later. Once this is done, we're getting pretty close to the end and the point where you're going to bring them in, right?
Yeah. Our goal right now is to, you know, as a board, go through these questions, identify where, you know, where do we need additional information. Then we will be bringing you guys in simply to answer those open items, so we can kind of be as efficient as we are here. So we do see the hands, and we will bring you in, and we're almost there.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
For Paul, regarding the vapor barrier. The vapor barriers could also be used for damp proofing, just general use.
Yes.
They're not directly necessarily tied to just preventing passage of chemicals and contamination, I guess. Just want to ask that. I mean, I think the fact that they're using a vapor barrier, to me, doesn't necessarily mean that it's being used because the site is a brownfield site.
No, it's a good point that you bring up, and I want to try to differentiate between the concept of a moisture barrier and a vapor barrier.
Right.
You know, the terms get kind of interchanged, but in my experience, a moisture barrier is a construction feature that prevents the migration of water vapor into the foundation structure of a building. A vapor barrier is similar, but it's typically installed in a different way, and it's typically a thicker material, and it's a more chemically resistant and inert material that's designed specifically to block the migration of contaminant vapors from soil, from contamination in soil into the building, to prevent degradation of indoor air quality.
Okay.
Thanks,
and
Paul.
It's not clear at this point exactly what the applicant is referring to when they
Right. It's an important distinction. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
And we can
All right.
certainly ask about that.
Okay, so next is consistency with community plans. So the proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans. This project actually isn't consistent with land use plans. It's using the new form-based code, which just passed. It's a little taller, obviously, but that is something that's subject to the zoning board question. I think it might be useful to go through these questions just to check.
Yeah, no, we should.
So the proposed actions, land use components may be different from or in sharp contrast to current surrounding land use patterns. I mentioned to you, yeah, go ahead.
No, I just, as we're talking about this, we can be mindful that it's on Croton Avenue, which is a main thoroughfare, but then two, very residential side streets as well. So kind of being mindful of kind of both portions of its site as we talk about that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think, you're going to, for the general public who's listening, it's probably important to understand that there are two different zoning districts. This property is in one zoning district. Those properties down on Prospect and Watson are in a different single family zoning district. So this district actually does allow properties that go up to 36 feet as of right from the grade plane, and allows for, retail on the bottom floor, residential on the top floor. The previous use notwithstanding, this type of use is allowed in this district, and the design, at least before the variances, is supported in the code in the direction of the recently passed comprehensive plan. So
When you say
that's
before the
it.
variance, you say before the variance, sorry, I just also want to be clear on this too, because there is no variance until there's a secret determination, right? So,
right.
We need to be looking at what's being proposed and what the zoning board is reviewing. So the height, I think, is very relevant to our determination.
So I want to take you on a little trip down the road here, because I was looking at this the other day and trying to figure out, well, how does this compare with other uses in the district? Especially from a size standpoint. So this property here is proposed to be, approximately 4 stories, 3.5, 4 stories in the area. So if you look right across the street, this property on the front end is about 2 stories with an additional, facade above that goes up a little higher. This property on the sort of the bottom end of the block ends up being almost 3 stories high. If you go down the street a little bit farther around the bend, again, this is all within the NC2 district, which this building is in that NC2 Croton Avenue district. If you go down the block to the Elks Club here, you will note that this building is about 4 stories high in the back end. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 stories high. So this building, even though it's shorter in the front by the sidewalk, it is actually somewhat higher here, leading back into this. So there's, different types of uses around here. Let me just make sure I'm not looking at this incorrectly, but that's the sort of the next highest stuff. So you can see here, this kind of loops all the way back around here, and these are connected uses to show you. So you see this is 1, 2,
5 stories
3, 4, 5 stories above grade. Here, that's a property on Croton Avenue. You go further down the street, you have this building here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 stories plus, this upper area. That is within the NC2 district. You continue to go farther down the streets. You have this school here, which is about 4 stories as well. I am not sure whether that's an NC2 district. I believe it might be. I don't believe it's compliant. If you go farther down, there's another building here. This building is not in the NC2 district, it's an NF2 district, but it's right by Croton Avenue, and as you can see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I think there's basements on one end with 7 stories in the other. So there's a mix. Now, at the same time, in the same token, there's a lot of other buildings that are 2 stories high in the district. So there is a mixture of the types of uses, sizes, and heights. There's a lot of this sort of mixed use, retail on the bottom floor, residential at the top floor in the district. So there's, quite a bit of variation in the style. But the mixed use nature of the NC2 district is something that's written into the code, anticipated as a part of the code, has been reinforced as part of the comprehensive plan. So from that perspective, I think that, there is some clarity as to whether or not it is, in contrast or not. So
Is this the longest site on Croton Avenue? Or it's a extremely long walk?
I'm not sure if it's the longest site. There is a site right across the street from the property, which is got less frontage, but has more depth. So I'll show you that. I think this board, well, no, it went to the zoning board. They had to go for some signage issues. Where is it?
View Living.
View Living, yeah, it's right here, View Living, okay. Yeah, so this property right here, View Living, is a rental. I mean, you can see it here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 stories rentals. And the property is pretty deep. It's probably bigger, in fact, than this property. And I believe it's also in the NC2 district. Actually, no, I don't think this is an NC2. This might be an MF2 district, but you can see the scale of this property is, it's about 4 stories here. So, and that's opposite corner. Although I think it's in a different zoning district. Here's the,
That's the NF.
Back in
there
time.
it is. And there it goes. So, yeah, okay.
Probably
So-
comparable in width to the supermarket property.
Which is in Briarcliff. Or are you talking about, the
Seatown, you mean?
Town?
Yes.
Yeah, Seatown's a little shorter, I think. I mean, it's 2 stories for sure. I mean, they're big 2 industrial type commercial stories. So it's probably 30 feet high.
Seth was asking about the width of the property.
The width of the
Long
property, yeah.
site too. Yeah, that's a good call with the Dunkin' that long.
Yeah, well, that's a big site too. I mean, it's deceptively large. It's deep. And
Yeah.
it's sort of loops around the back. There's a bunch of, access right of ways as well. So it's not the biggest site, but it's definitely one of the bigger sites in the district. Okay, so with that in mind, I guess, taking you back to the question, in the proposed actions, land use components may be different from or in sharp contrast to current surrounding land use patterns. And so how does the board want to go on this one? You're on mute, Bobby.
I would say no on this one. I don't think it's sharp contrast to the surrounding areas.
I think certainly from a land use perspective, right? I mean, it's commercial on the corner with residential units, and that's the way this corridor is used. I mean, I don't think that in and of itself is a contrast.
I agree. I think, going through all those different buildings is actually very helpful. It's not a sharp difference at all.
Yeah, I agree. From the land use component, which is what this question is asking for, I would say no.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. It's going, a lot of the ones that we looked at are a bit more set back and whatever, but from land use pattern, then no, it's not a sharp contrast.
All right, so next question, the proposed action will cause the permanent population of the city, town, or village in which the project is located to grow by more than 5%. I don't remember the actual numbers on this, but I think that the
It's majority 1 bedrooms, right?
It's like a split between studios and ones. I think that the numbers on it are like 100 people. And last I checked, it's like 28,000 people in the village of Ossining. So it doesn't even approach.
Yeah, no, it's not. Just math, it's easy.
Okay. So the proposed action is inconsistent with local land use plans or zoning regulations. And
You can tell us what the comp plan says, Jaime.
okay. Let's pull up the comp plan. So let's go to their response here on this. So C2, C3. So let's pull up what they wrote, because they did give us some feedback on the comp plan questions. I think they did that in their follow-up memo, right, Joe Jamili?
Yes, I don't have it handy though.
I have it.
It's on pages 2 and 3. And then it goes on to 4 as well.
Okay, so the all right. All right, you said 3 and 4? I'm sorry.
So I'm looking at the February 15th version of their memo.
Okay, so they, if I recall correctly, Joe had comments asking for more information on the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
They came back with more comments on the comprehensive plan on a second document. And so what they wrote here is the comprehensive plan does not include or address specific plans for the project site. Consistency with adopted land use plans, EAF Item C2 was expanded upon in the technical memorandum from VHB as follows. This project would introduce a multifamily residential affordable senior residence, retail and flex community space on the subject property to allow the proposed development on a site that was previously developed with a commercial use. The site is located in an NC2 neighborhood center zoning district, which is a business mixed use district that allows for residential uses on condition of approval. Site is located immediately across the street from MF1 zoning district, which is a multifamily residential zoning district. Further, the site is bounded on the south by S75 zoning district, which is zoning and single family residential zoning. The subject property would be a reasonable location for the proposed affordable senior housing use. However, the multifamily use is not envisioned for the site. In the adopted comprehensive plan, the proposed development may be considered to be a slight impact to the adopted land use plan. There is other multifamily use in the immediate area, including properties across from Croton Avenue located at 135 Croton Avenue, 6 units, and 7 Sherwood Avenue, 6 units. The proposed residential use is consistent with these and other surrounding residential uses with limited variances. The project is consistent with the neighborhood center zoning district and the Croton Avenue form-based overlay zone. The project would introduce bike enhanced pedestrian features, add civic spaces described in the Croton Avenue form-based overlay zone requirements. This is the first project to be reviewed under the recently adopted 2021 form-based overlay district. Further, the development of the subject property with the proposed development is expected to be consistent with the surrounding uses and would not result in any significant adverse impacts on the surrounding community. You know, I would just add that, and they mentioned it here, but when they came and approached the site, originally they decided to apply under the form-based code because they wanted to be consistent with the most recent changes that the property had made. If they had not done that, right? If they had initially, I think they were thinking about using some residential purposes on the bottom floor. And so it was a help to them. But if they had not done that, right? And they had gone straight with the NC2 zone under the current design, then the only variances that they would need are for parking and height. Because they're using the form-based code, they need parking height as well as sort of the building coverage because it's a little closer to the line than what's allowed under the form-based code in one corner rather than what they would be required to do if it was NC2 zone, which is a 0. They could have gone to a 0 lot line building. So they did try to step it back and make it consistent as much as they could. So in that sense, it's more in conformance with the most recent adjustments to the comprehensive plan than it is with the old comprehensive plan, which didn't have a form-based code and just relied on the NC2 district. The only changes that were made in this district for the comprehensive plan were related to those types of uses. The comp plan did not look at parking and did not look at height. So it didn't make any changes to those in the recent plan. So the pursuit of the height variances and the pursuit of the parking variances, you know, are something they would have gone through before. The parking variance question, I think, has been dealt with here in a discussion about the impact of providing less parking than code requires. That was looked at by BFJ, and BFJ determined that there was going to be sufficient parking for the demand that was going to be generated on site. In fact, there would be more parking than necessary for the demand on site. And then they also did a shadow study and provided some additional screening behind the property. So I'm not sure if the board has seen the shadow study. If you haven't, I can play it for you now.
I believe they presented it at our last meeting.
Okay. So you've seen that. So I think you have enough information here to make decisions. So it's kind of up to you.
Yeah, I mean, could we go back into the way that these, go back to the questions that we're answering, right, so we can look at them. But
yeah. So the proposed action is inconsistent with local land use plans or zoning regulations. And it is definitely inconsistent on a certain level with the zoning regulations because they're seeking variances. But the question is whether it is a small impact or a moderate to large impact.
I think specific to this question, I think it's a small impact. I think that it's, you know, they're tweaking the corners here and there to make things work. I think the height is something we can talk about. But by and large, for this question, I think it's a small impact.
I think so too. I think if anything, this is kind of where the new comprehensive plan is really headed. So, yeah.
Yes, I also agree. I think it's the impact is either no or to small impact.
I agree. I would check no or small impact. I agree.
I would also check no or small impact.
Okay. All right, the proposed action is inconsistent with any county plans or other regional land use plans. We sent this to the county and the county has no comments.
I rely on.
They said it's I believe they said it's a local land use matter and they have no comments. So I think that's the answer from the county's planning.
Agreed.
The proposed action may cause a change in the density of development that is not supported by existing infrastructure or is distant from existing infrastructure. So this is a two-part question. I think you got to remember that you need to meet both the first and the second question. So is it going to change the density of development? Yes, but also that's not supported by existing infrastructure or is distant from existing infrastructure. And Joe Cimelli, I think you can answer that question.
Yeah, so they provided us with water and sewer capacity evaluations. Both seem to provide or demonstrate adequate capacity. There is some confirmation on each that we had requested and that they're in the process of obtaining and providing to us. I'd be surprised to find that there isn't sufficient capacity. But it's a matter of and maybe when they come in, they could, let us know where they're at. But with regard to water, they evaluated the domestic use. We had questioned the need for fire flow and adequate capacity and pressure for fire flow. They told us their response that they need to analyze that yet. So we'll need to get that information. They did provide in their technical response some additional capacity calculations related to the sewer. I believe the sewer, that issue's been resolved. So I'd like to see the adequacy for the fire flow to put that to bed. As far as the infrastructure as it relates to the roadway and the transportation network, I think BFJ has already opined and there's no concern in that regard.
So I think let's get some further clarification from the.
Okay, so we'll return to that question. The proposed action is located in an area characterized by low density development that would require new or expanded public infrastructure. So I think if you just look at sort of the traffic question, they're making improvements to the public sidewalks. There are already public sidewalks in the area, but they're making improvements to those. And then it's not a low density area per se. I think that, people who live in adjacent neighborhoods may say, oh, this is low density area, but it's not. I don't think it meets the technical definition of what a low density area would be. They're kind of, small houses on small lots, and a lot of them. So
is there a workbook definition of that? I don't want to just skirt past that because it is a big issue here.
Yeah.
I'll pull that up really quick. Okay. I think that what this is kind of getting at is whether there needs to be any sewer or other sorts of public infrastructure lines extended or anything like that, but let's see what the workbook says. So this is it right here. So we know that density refers to the number of dwelling units. These questions explore whether the proposed project will result and a change in density that will require new or expanded infrastructure, which includes things such as water, sewer, newer upgraded roads, sidewalks, or paths, and solid waste facilities. When a project requires this newer expanded infrastructure, it not only has direct effects on the environment due to land disturbance, but also affects taxes, fiscal health, future growth. In many places.
Helpful.
Yeah. So is the infrastructure needed? I think that's a really important distinction. Jaime pointed out that there are sidewalk improvements. I think down the street they're putting in that crosswalk improvement. Those are all being requested by DPW. I don't know that it's required, and there's certainly no sewer lines or other water lines that need to be extended to this location. They're already all in place, and I think Joe Termelli can confirm that. I saw that in the materials.
Correct.
But as far as I can tell, any infrastructure improvements are being done to improve the area, which is already high density, and also as kind of an indication that this is adding to an already high density area.
Okay.
So is that
I think that, yeah, I think that's helpful. I think we can take a look at that question. And we were gonna on letter, I mean, it's kind of tied to what we were asking for in letter E, so we can get a quick answer from the applicant on that before we give a final check on it, but that helps.
Okay. So next question is, the proposed action may induce secondary development impacts, e.g. residential or commercial development not included in the proposed action. I think that I think you can say no here. There's not a lot of undeveloped property over here. In fact, I'm not sure if there's much of any.
Can you put that back up on the screen too, so we can see it?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I think also it's more important to note that the comprehensive plan and the creation of the form-based code was intended to incentivize the development of some of these properties. So that property was definitely evaluated as part of the comp plan as a redevelopment site. And so the form-based code wanted to see the redevelopment of it. So I think in that sense, it shouldn't be inducing any secondary development impacts. Rather, it's probably a secondary development impact of the comprehensive plan.
I agree. I think that's no impact there.
Yeah, I agree. No impact.
Yeah, agree.
I agree as well.
All right, and consistency with community character, everybody's favorite. All right, the proposed action may replace or eliminate existing facilities, structures, or areas of historic importance to the community.
I think that's a no.
That's an easy no, yeah.
Okay. The proposed action may create a demand for additional community services, e.g. schools, police, and fire. I know I read somewhere that, and I'm trying to remember if it was
It's on page 3 of their revised memo, Jaime. They did a nice job summarizing the emergency services that are available: police,
Okay.
fire, ambulance. I don't know that we've heard from any of those emergency service providers and what their thoughts are on the development and whether or not, they see any issues in serving. It'd be nice, particularly with regard to the ambulance service, being that this is a senior development. I would expect that there'd be more frequent calls than if this were just a, standard multifamily building. So have we heard from police, fire, or the ambulance corps to date?
no. No, we haven't heard from them. We can reach out to them again. We can pursue an answer. I can't make any promises that we're definitely going to get an answer. They're both volunteer, and so it is somewhat challenging to get anybody to nail down a concrete answer on these things. But we'll reach out and you think we can ask the applicant to see if they reached out to OVAC. I mean, it's clear that they did reach out to OVAC based off of the response that they got here. So, so I think, you know, we'll see.
Okay.
Maybe give them an opportunity to come back and answer that question.
Sounds good.
Okay.
We should just note that there's, you know, it's as a senior community, there should be no impact in schools other than maybe the children of the superintendent that they noted would be living outside.
Correct. So the proposed action may displace affordable or low-income housing in an area where there's a shortage of such housing. I think that's a definitely no. The proposed action may interfere with the use or enjoyment of officially recognized or designated public resources. That's a no. The proposed action is inconsistent with the predominant architectural scale and character.
This building is large. You know, it's larger than the adjacent buildings. We looked at buildings on the site that Jaime just walked us through that are, you know, similar, if not, you know, for instance, the Elks Club where you're going up, it was like 5 stories above grade. But it's, you know, it's definitely would be one of the larger buildings on this stretch of the road. I don't know if that qualifies as a.
This might be a good opportunity to pull up the workbook because again, it's a question of whether it's a moderate or if it's a small impact.
Correct.
Okay. Will do.
So it's 18E.
Thank you.
And I'll mention it here because I'm sure that Michael Zarin is just probably like it's jumping out of his pants right now. He will tell you that a lot of municipalities are now removing some of the community character questions from the discussion of consistency for affordable housing developments because of the challenges associated with building affordable housing through tax credit programs and being in conformance with suburban code. So I'm not telling you to agree or disagree with that, but he's stated that on the record here before, and I'm sure he's probably trying to scream through his computer screen right now.
He's knocking. So this has to be defined locally through understanding size, height, dimensions, and intensity of uses as they already exist in not just the neighborhood, but the community. Let's see, a new structure that is larger, taller, or different architectural styles could be inconsistent with existing character. Also have to examine color scheme, window, door configuration. These are VAR issues, themes. But this is from an environmental standpoint, as we know. So the analysis would involve figuring out what the current predominant architectural scale and character is. And this is how you would do that, which is defining the size, height, setback, and site layout common to existing structures in the area. And then defining what the architectural details are. And then what is the architectural scale of the proposed new structure and how does it differ from the existing? The small impact would be if the visual character of the area is changed in a minor way, but is generally consistent in design, placement, size, color, intensity, and architecture of the neighborhood or community. Moderate to large is if the proposal introduces an architectural style that's in sharp contrast, which involves its size, window or door size and style, building materials, roof pitch, facade, color. So it involves a whole lot more than just size and height, is what I'm getting as the bottom line, but it's up to you guys to assess.
I think it kind of depends how you look at the neighborhood and as well, because what's right there on Croton Avenue, to me, it's not inconsistent. If you go back into the side streets, then that's, you know, then it is inconsistent. But on Croton Avenue itself, I don't think it is.
I think we're evaluating this in the context of Croton Avenue and the, the buildings in that NC district specifically, but it also, I mean, the language that Amanda just pointed out expands this kind of as far as the community in general. I live right near this neighborhood. I live on one of these side streets right off Croton Avenue, a couple blocks from this site, and it's kind of what this neighborhood is. It's houses that you go down the hill and you're on the main road with a different kind of building. And I think that's, I think that we have to evaluate this in the context of Croton Avenue, where it's not a single family house that's going to be put on that lot. I don't think that would be fair to try to evaluate it that way.
And not just the NC2 zone, but also the overlay, so we're considering the fact that this is, again, a form-based application.
Yeah, and on that note, for me, the challenge of this project is that it's actually the first project, right, to come into this form-based code overlay. And there's not much on Croton Avenue, I would say. Yes, there are buildings with similar use, similar number of stories, but in terms of the form-based zoning with the street walls and whatnot, there are a few examples of that right now. I think this project could be a catalyst, perhaps, I don't know, for developing more of a, perhaps some other projects in the future are going to come online and with the form-based zoning and this, you're going to start seeing some sort of semblance between sites with the street walls, and the form-based goal will come to fruition in the future, perhaps. But right now, because it's the first one, for me, that's kind of where the challenge is. Perhaps even more so than what's happening behind with the single family zoning areas.
And I'd like to note that part of the way that the form-based code was written was to try to create some consistency for new projects with the existing setbacks and architecture. So the current NC2 zone has a maximum setback of, I want to say 20 or 25 feet, and a minimum setback of 0. So you're allowed to build a property all the way up to the curb, or to essentially to the lot line. What this does is essentially requires under the form-based code a setback of 15 feet from the curb line. So it ensures that there is more consistent setback, and that 15-foot setback from the curb line was something that is pretty consistent in the older housing stock on Croton Avenue, although not universal. So when they came in and tried to build it according to the form-based code, that was probably over everything, the biggest way that they were able to conform was to set the building back farther than they would have been required to do had they not followed the form-based code, because they would have been more like 10 feet, 8 feet away from the curb in certain instances. So that's the big change there. And that, hopefully that's useful for you in making your decision here about its consistency.
And I also think architecturally, I mean, the roof lines, the fenestration, those kind of architectural elements, look consistent with what, I mean, if you can say that there's anything consistent on Croton Avenue, because there really isn't. There's a lot going on there, but it doesn't seem to me to look out of place. And so, to that degree, I think architecturally, I think that's there. I think to me, for me, where I think there may be some, whether that's small or not, is kind of in the height. I think that just the overall size of it. And again, that I think does go back to the, to the form-based overlay kind of question in terms of pushing the building back from the sidewalk, but it winds up going up. I don't know. I think that's something. I'm curious how other people see that.
I think Seth, to your point, I think the size and scale and the massing is what's going to be inconsistent more than the architecture on this project, in my opinion.
Would it be worthwhile to pull up a rendering?
Yes, definitely.
Sure, I got the right renderings here. Okay, so here's the revised elevations. Let me share the screen. So this is what the property looks like. So you can see it's kind of got this, pitch roof. It's got different step backs. So the property rises up 3 feet at the property line here, steps back. It rises up 2 stories here, steps back. It rises up 3 stories here, steps back. So there's a lot of effort to do that so that from the pedestrian experience, it doesn't feel as high along Croton Avenue. The biggest visual impact probably is in this one corner here from the side where it's a little bit taller. These are, some other angles where you can see the different heights. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you showed us the building across the street, which is like the inverse of this, where the lower elevation presents to Croton Avenue, and then the taller, larger facade faces the residential neighborhood. And it's just, because of the way, the hill continues down. In certain respect, this is better, right? Because you want the larger facade to face the busier street, and then the smaller portions to fit along the side street. But it's still up there. These are helpful to look at.
I think it is actually, when you look at that west elevation, it's tall toward the the more single family home area behind than onto Croton Avenue, right? Because you're looking at the back there with the trees.
Yeah, let me pull up the actual, because it's a weird kind of a street in that there's the site has like such a change in grade here. I mean, I think even looking at that picture, you look at it and say, God, is the grade that significant from one side to the other? And I think what you see here when you pull up on the property, you see this is flat down here, before it was all covered up. And you see, I mean, it does actually go up like significantly. Obviously the roadbed's a little lower, but the houses themselves have to go up a hill as well. So the visual look from the property is, it's looking at the back of the building for sure. And it's shown that way. So there's probably an additional story above the top of the peak of that roof here. And I think these are like 2 stories here. So the second story is probably looking in, so from the vantage point of that person here, there's probably 1 to 2 stories above their line of sight. But it is a steep hill. Yeah, it is a steep hill.
It's a very steep hill.
So these are the most recent elevations. We have some older renderings too that I think we're in. Let's hope. Want to say hi? Yeah, fine.
And as that's pulling up, I know, Amanda, when you were going through the workbook, I mean, we're not looking at one factor, and it, the scale is one factor which I am concerned with. I think that there's a lot of other, a lot of these other design factors, kind of in the way this thing sits in the site, like I think are pretty appropriate. I just want to make sure that we have some sort of consensus as a board in terms of how we feel with these components, because it's what we've talked about here in the past when we were reviewing this in any case. But
I hear
Good
you.
document. Sorry about this, y'all. Big document. Didn't do anything. All right, great. Thanks, Alex.
they're blank.
James, all right. Okay. Let me see if there's. Yeah, here we go. So I mean, it's the same. Same.
What are those?
Yeah.
It's the fencing.
The only difference is they still have this entryway here. Basically, it's not any different.
That's a prior version. Yeah, that's an earlier.
Here's the prior version with that. I mean, it's the same.
Yeah.
Not the renderings per se.
Here we go.
Here are the renderings. Only I could get this to zoom in. You know what? I'm gonna go to one of the old renderings because I think that might be the easiest way to deal with it. Those are just too big, those plans. So let me set this up.
We have another hand up now in the room.
Yeah. They're probably all, reaching out and trying to slap me right now for not pulling up the right thing. So that's, yeah. Yeah.
Should we, I mean, because we can also ask them to show us those renderings as well. And I think we're almost through these questions. And so we can bring them in to kind of to walk through the rest. Let's go through this on our own with two bullets left, right?
Okay, so the proposed action is inconsistent with the predominant architectural scale and character. So the only thing that, I could pull up you've got the elevations, which I think probably do a better job of showing the scale than the renderings do.
Yeah.
So that's a question, again, I think everybody agrees that it's bigger. The question is it moderate? Or is it small? Yeah,
right. And the other part is just understanding the nature of the question. It says predominant architectural scale and character. I think the character, I think it's in character with, it's consistent with the predominant architectural character. Scale and character together, I don't know. And so if that allows us to, or I don't know, that's
you've gone through the workbook now.
Yeah.
You've gone through the renderings. I think unless you should either ask for more information or I would recommend sort of taking a vote on it here.
Yeah, I don't know what other information we could ask for particularly. I think we've, to me, I would say this is a small rather than a large impact, because looking at it from the Croton Avenue perspective, I don't think it's that inconsistent.
Yeah, I agree with Nina. I think if if we just look at the building by itself, it does look inconsistent, but if we compare it in relation to the buildings on Croton Avenue, and that kind of gives us a baseline, then it's the impact is it's small to no impact.
Yeah, I'm gonna say no impact or small impact. I actually appreciate how the massing is stepped back from Croton Avenue. Croton Avenue is only perceived as 3 stories, and the higher stories are towards the back. Now that could create some questions about you're putting most of the higher mass on the building right next to the smallest density. But I don't think, I mean, to answer this question, I think it's as a no or small impact for me.
I agree with everyone else. It's a small impact. Architecturally, it's in line. The size is just a little bigger, but when you combine the two, it's just a small impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I've obviously been hemming and hawing on this in my mind as we discussed this, but I think reminding myself that we're looking at both scale and character together, and that we're also defining this, you know, as Nina pointed out, Croton Avenue and the larger community at large. As we walked down community, you know, Croton Avenue into some of those other districts, you know, within half mile of this site, you know, we have 6-story, you know, brick buildings, you know, which are much larger. You know, so from a scale perspective, I think there is consistency. There's consistency there. So I am comfortable. I think there is an impact, but I think it would be small.
So the next question is, the proposed action is inconsistent with the character of the existing natural landscape. And I would note here that they are, you know, you saw that it's already been excavated previously. It's pretty low in the back, so they're not really altering the depth of where things were. They're, you know, accessing Prospect, you know, through the parking lot at grade. They're accessing Watson through the parking lot at grade. And so they're not really changing the site in any sort of appreciable way from that endpoint. So
I think that you know, as you know, as Ulysses pointed out earlier, the building is responsive to the topography there, which I think is, you know, I think it works with the natural landscape in that regard. And I don't see an impact there.
I agree. I think it's small to no impact.
Agreed.
Agreed as well. Small to no impact.
cool. All right, so that's the last question. I'm gonna go back to the top and then let's bring in all these raised hands.
Let's do it. We can just bring in the whole, we'll bring in the whole group and we can kind of go through. I took some notes. I don't, at what point I kind of caught up with. But you know, we can just, I think if we just go through the unchecked boxes and just ask for what we need to ask for.
I'm here. Are we on?
You are.
Boy, oh boy, I was busting over here.
There should be like a bouncing hand feature.
I can think of some people that might take you know, advantage of the bouncing hand.
Yeah. Well, my first thoughts, and then we'll get into it with of course, at the leadership of the chair and board members, is to thank you all for doing this, to taking additional time out and creating this work session and giving this project the opportunity to go through in detail all of the potential impacts after you take your requisite hard look under seeker. So thank you so much for doing this, and I can tell you we're very appreciative. We think a 62-year and older project that's affordable in this site is a worthy project, and that's why we're hanging in there with you, because we think this could and should be a good outcome. I will tell you, I'll leave it to Michael to talk on the brownfield piece, but on the SHPO piece, the natural resources and archaeology, we've already answered the question. I emailed Joe Tremelli and Jamie and Jamie. The SHPO letter we received, no negative impact. You can check that box already. So we have done that. I'm going to defer at this point to Michael Zarin because there were some issues that I had of concern on the, if the chairman so allows, on the brownfield discussion.
So I think what I would like to do is, since we've already started going through these questions, and I think our goal, our outcome today is to really have to have checked all the boxes and to be able to have staff draft this, the negative declaration if that's what the outcome is. So we had we closed off a lot of boxes. There were some brownfield questions, but we'll get to that. So I think I'd like to go through. Starting on, I think it was question 14, Jaime, unless we had something before that.
You did have a couple, so I just want to go through, I'll go through the list of all the yeses. So I'm gonna start with the tree question, impact on plants and animals. So it's a yes here. It's our belief that you're probably gonna need a tree permit here. So we just need a tree survey of all the properties to identify any trees that are 6 inches or above and a plan to replace those trees on site.
I'm just going to ask that you share your screen while we do this so we can follow along.
Sorry about that.
All good.
So we just need to get the survey done and then verified by our arborist, and then a tree replacement plan. You already have a planting plan that I believe at least at this point includes more trees than you're taking away. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. But the board does want to know what kind of trees you're looking to replace and what kind of trees you're taking out.
So all right,
Joe, can I just jump into this a sec? Because I think it.
Michael, just let me give some time from the ownership standpoint. And Nina made the points. They were good ones on the type of plantings.
You're breaking up, Joe. Joe, you're breaking up.
Can you hear me?
You're a little you're freezing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're on Wi-Fi, but I think your connection might be a little bad.
I'm not on Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, I'm in a hotel room somewhere in a private setting. So
that's kind of crazy. That's a little edgy.
No, it's a business office in a hotel. So I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Sometimes if you turn off your video, that may also help.
All right, I'll do that. I was going to say, kind of made the point on the various vegetation and trees and the like. We're happy to provide, whether they be indigenous trees and what have you. We're happy to cooperate on that with the planning board and work cooperatively as a condition of the negative declaration resolution. I have no predisposition of what we have proposed. It was something that my landscape architect had made as a suggestion, but we are not hard and fast. So yes, we will cooperate on that.
Yeah, Jaime, and Mr. Chairman, is all I wanted to say was, I think from a secret point of view, and I think that's where at least my observations are going to come. I think there was a general consensus that based upon the trees that are out there and the landscaping that we've proposed, that we're not going to have a significant adverse effect. Now that I think having a tree survey and the like, I think those things could probably go more to site plan,
So I think that, yeah, maybe to kind of jump in here in a minute, if you could help me out a little bit with this. So for purposes of secret, I think that we're going to need to close the loop on this and say that you're going to need to get a tree permit from the planning board. What that tree permit looks like in terms of a sort of a replacement plan is yet to be determined. But if the seeker document states that, as a part of a mitigation measure to the impact of the loss of trees, they're going to be required to get a tree permit, which will include a replacement plan to be determined by the planning board down the road. You just need to understand that, it'll be a condition that has to get addressed at some point before you get your site plan. Yeah. And so there's not going to be any wiggle room You're just gonna have to accept whatever the planning board tells you to do.
That's what I was saying. I think it's a condition of, I mean, it could be mentioned in the neg deck, that's fine, but it's gonna be a condition of site plan approval, and that's gonna be a requirement for us, obviously pulling building permits to comply with that, so.
Yeah, I don't think we need to spell out the planting plan or the replacements in the neg deck. It'll be basically that it'll be required and
Exactly.
yeah, totally agree.
All right, I think we're on the same
Agreed.
page.
Agreed. Okay. Your next one, I think you said was 14, the energy
Well,
question.
let me just.
Hold on,
I would
let me go
I would
through
like
it.
For Jaime to clarify that, just.
Yeah, let me go through the list here because we got a couple items. That wasn't the only one. So there's the impact on historic and archaeological surveys. It's 10.
Right.
And so the proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to an area designated as sensitive for archaeological sites on the New York State Historic Preservation Archaeological Site Survey. And so as mentioned, the property is adjacent to and sort of like a section, a small portion of it is within that as defined by them. So we have a SHPO letter, right? I am going to pull it up now because I just got that from Joe Apicella. Got a lot of Joes here.
I sent it to Joe Tremelli as well.
Yeah, no, I have it right here. So thank you for requesting comments on the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. We have reviewed the project in accordance with New York State Historic Preservation Act of 1980. These comments are those of OPRHP and relate only to historic cultural resources. They do not include potential environmental impacts in New York State parkland that may be involved in or near projects. Such impacts are considered as part of the environmental review project pursuant to seeker. Based on this review is the opinion of OPRHP that no properties, including archaeological and historic resources listed in or eligible for New York State and National Register of Historic Places will be impacted by this project.
I think that's,
Okay.
yeah,
I
I think
mean,
that's super helpful.
I don't know.
You're welcome.
Should we look at the wording of the questions to?
Sorry, we didn't get it to you. So
Amanda and Joe, do y'all want to weigh in on whether this is enough here?
Yeah, that Jaime is the letter that I was referring to earlier, that, you know, this letter essentially closes the loop on any concern regarding historic significance.
That's very helpful.
Okay. All right. So I think you can move forward with saying no then here.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, agree.
Okay. Moving on then. So we're on to the next question, which is impact on energy.
Right.
So the proposed action may utilize more than 2,500 megawatt hours per year of electricity. Jacqueline is saying no.
No, no.
Not even close. No, we're
yeah.
not, we may reach 1 megawatt, maybe, if we're not behaving.
Just to give you guys a quick calculation, 74 single family houses would be not even a quarter. So.
Okay, so the next question is the proposed action may involve heating and or cooling of more than 100,000 square feet of building area when completed. The building is 103,000 square feet. So can you talk a little bit about what you're doing for the heating and cooling? I know you're going for some LEED stuff. So maybe describe your energy efficiency plan here.
We can, but we are also under that 100,000 square feet, Jaime.
You are, okay. Your
Yes.
original document said 103. So,
I know. So the latest, if you pull up the last site, I think it's the 07. I believe it's 07. It may be the 11th. I can double check. I actually have it up as well.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and share it?
Let me just share screen.
Great.
So it's the February 11th. So that's on record there. We have the gross floor area total and it's the 99,144, including our 2 parking levels are included in there, which don't need to receive the heating and cooling.
Where did you go down? How did you go down from 103?
We reduced quite a bit on the 3rd floor, I believe it is. And these were just more precise numbers that we've added. We reduced a couple of the units. We haven't completely reduced the area, but if you recall, we pulled back the corner over at Croton and Prospect. So we reduced area there. And I don't remember, we changed it about 10 times between our initial submission and now, but we have been reducing the area.
I think given that we're, within, 900 square feet of that threshold, it'd be helpful just to give us a brief description of what it is that your basic heating cooling plant.
Let me pull up. Joe, do you want to run through? I can't find Joe. Where's Joe?
Me?
Here. Yeah, do you want to run through the systems that you were mentioning with you that you and Rella typically prefer to install?
Yeah, I mean, you can do it just as well. We did a code gen. We're not doing a code gen here, but it will be an all electric system.
So there's 2 questions I think that you're going to want to answer here, not just that what you're using to heat and cool, but also the any things you're doing to insulate the building to lower the demand.
Yep. Okay. So for insulation factor, if you want, Joe, I can speak on that.
Sure.
Okay, so we will be increasing the insulation. We do that with every building. We do a mix of zip systems as well as spray insulation in addition to bat insulation. So quite often we're calling for much more than the energy code relates to. And we find ourselves passing even the HERS ratings, all of those significantly more so than what the code requires.
And as far as the systems, the MEP engineer is studying, we're going to look at a heat pump system here, very efficient, and something we've used in many of our buildings. As you know, this is not our first rodeo, as they say. So the heat pump system is probably what we'll be utilizing. And we're going to have this building be a minimal LEED certified building. We'd like to go to LEED Silver, but we're not quite there yet, but we may go there.
Thanks, guys. That satisfies me as far as, small or no impact.
I agree, same.
I'm in agreement as well. I'm in agreement.
Yeah, agree.
Agree for me too.
Okay.
Stuff I may.
Yep. So next question is impact on noise, odor, and light. The proposed action may produce sound above noise levels established by local regulations. One of my questions was whether or not you're going to have any sort of, loud stuff on the building, cogeneration, things of that nature. We've lost Joe. Is any of that anticipated, that you're going to add any sort of loud structures on the top of the building that would add noise?
No, the nature of the system, Joe, or a question is implemented in numerous locations. There's essentially no large exterior single unit equipment. It's mostly internally housed. So there's not an array of 70 condenser units on the outside. We're not a central cooling tower.
Okay, and during construction, you are anticipating some noises. You have put together a construction logistics plan to deal with some of that stuff, right?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we've, yes, LRC Construction, which has done, I guess, many of the large high-rise and mid-rises, White Plains and throughout Westchester would be our construction management team. And they have, in fact, developed a construction management plan that will mitigate noise, dust, all of those factors as much as humanly possible. Now, as a practical matter, construction is construction. So to expect it's going to be absolutely 100% perfect, I think we all know on this call from experience, that's not the case. But given the level of professionalism, I think that you'll see from us, we will mitigate those impacts, and the construction management plan, I think, illustrates that.
So, I mean, this is helpful. I think, as we move forward, seeing documentation of the HVAC systems, showing that you've got internal units, through wall, through window, whatever you're doing, I think will be helpful just to back this up. But with that provided, I would be comfortable with a no or small.
Okay. Blasting. Do you anticipate there will be any blasting?
No.
Do you have a contingency in your construction logistics plan to deal with it if you do need to do blasting?
No, we don't anticipate. We've never had to do blasting on sites like this. We've done thorough geotechnical work. We know what's there. I have, there'll be piles. There'll be no blasting.
Joe Tremella, do you want
to? Well, I don't have anything to refute that. So if they're saying they're not going to blast, they're not going to blast. Right?
Okay.
I think bedrock is pretty deep, right?
Yes.
I mean, that can be spelled out.
Already out there, Joe?
I beg your pardon?
You already did some preliminary borings?
Yes.
And you have an idea what the depth of bedrock was?
If you're gonna, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I can get that. Let me ask, is Franz, are you on the call?
Was here, yeah. I saw him. I don't know if he made the.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, great. They want to know, Franz, about the depth of the bedrock there, and because obviously we've made it clear we're not going to be doing any blasting at all on this site. Can you give some insights?
I don't have the exact numbers with me right now, but from what I recall, it's pretty deep, and I don't think we're going to have any issues with rock. And if we do, it'll be able to be ripped with an excavator. So
yeah, you can chip it.
Yep. We're not excavating very deep in any area of the building. For the most part, 2/3 of the westerly end of the building is on grade, on existing grade.
Okay.
I think that's good.
Okay. The proposed action may result in routine odors for more than 1 hour per day.
Well, I'm just hoping that all the workmen have good hygiene. I mean, what kind of question is that? I don't know how to answer that.
Hand out deodorant at the beginning of the job site.
That's the most ridiculous. I don't know what kind of odors there.
I mean, we can go into the workbook, but I think that what they're referring to is.
I don't care what workbook you look at. What odors could they be talking about?
Noxious
There's
odors.
a cafeteria with
Noxious odors? Okay.
That's what I would.
Okay, but the answer is no. Again, we have never spewed noxious odors on all the projects we've done.
Well, I would anticipate that if anything, there'd be maybe truck emissions during construction, but again, that would be addressed by your construction management plan.
There you go.
That's the extent that I would say about that.
Okay.
Just go easy on the aftershave, Joe.
like the trees that were delivering topsoil and there before, were they tested for noxious odors?
Oh, that's a good point.
Okay.
All right. Photometrics.
The proposed action may result in light shining onto adjoining property. That damn lighting plan just won't ever go away. Jacqueline, can you? Jacqueline?
Yeah, Jacqueline, that's her. This is her fault. I mean,
This
her
is,
plan.
yes, Jacqueline, can you pull up the lighting plan? You got a lot of
Yes.
documents. Just couldn't
Yes.
find it again.
Give me 1 second. I have it. Here it is. I want to make sure this is the latest one. I think it is. Yeah. I think this is the latest one. If not, I can pull up. Oh, I cannot start sharing while other participants are sharing.
Oh, sorry about that. There you go.
We haven't made any updates to it, Jacqueline, so it's
Okay, so this is
fine.
it here. So we've indicated all of the lighting locations along
Yeah.
here. We've not proposed any along the rear at the residential side.
Yeah, so, yeah, okay.
So you're good past the lot line. You're not shining anything into the back and.
Correct.
No.
Well, there's a little, very small amount on the street that I see here. So I don't know if the board would like to see more downcast on the Prospect and Watson side. Or is that lighting necessary for the safety of the entering and exiting vehicles?
Where are you speaking?
I'm sorry.
I would propose that if you overlaid the existing ambient light from street lights, et cetera, it would override and overlap these lighting contours to a higher number.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a Cobra head right in front of the property. I think right opposite that driveway entry, overhead street light. So I think that's going to dominate in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so how does the board feel? It's not shining onto adjoining properties.
I feel comfortable with this.
Okay.
We get that plan. Other board members can chime in.
Yeah, I think there's no to minimal impact on the lighting plan.
Yeah, I agree.
Agree as well.
Yeah, agree.
Okay. Proposed action may result in lighting creating a sky glow brighter than existing area conditions. You just saw the lighting plan. It's pretty minimal. So.
Yeah, Hey, Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Joe, which Joe?
Petrelli, sorry.
Oh, I think that, I was wondering, I'm still
I
trying to
figured-
find what a sky glow is. I don't know.
No, I mean, similar to before with the existing, just the existing streetlights alone, there's already ambient light that's, I don't see this project providing any kind of negative adverse impact in addition to what's already there.
Works for me.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. All right, we're getting close. All right, so the vapor barrier that you're going to install on the bottom of this property, does it satisfy track 1 remediation? Is the vapor barrier being installed to deal with expected, vapor leaching out from the brownfield, or is it a moisture barrier, or what is this?
Michael, I'm going to start off and then I'd like you to
Yeah, you
follow up.
take the technical.
Is that okay? Yeah, the vapor barriers, and again, it gives you and your engineers some comfort. I believe the gentleman's name was Paul, some comfort. We have done 5 brownfield cleanups, much more complicated than we anticipate here in Westchester County. One included Harbor Square in Austin. And each one of those, notwithstanding what was stated here earlier, were cleaned to track 1 standards. It's in our case, in our experience, it's not unusual at all to sustain the track 1 standard, and we anticipate we will here as well. And the vapor barrier that we would provide would most certainly, and the remediation we would provide for this site, not unlike the brownfield we just cleaned up and received certificate of completion in Mount Vernon, Jaime, which you're familiar with, will provide for the standard of use that we are providing at that site, because DEC requires us to do that. It's not something that villages, towns, or cities typically ever get involved in. The DEC governs this process. And when we interact with them, all the inspections are done by DEC. When we interact with them, that site and that decision document that we will get at the end of this process will tell us that we have met a standard that equates to the protection and usability of the uses that we've provided. And that's what we've done, gentlemen and ladies, on every one of our brownfield projects.
All right, if I could, I'm going to tweak it a little bit. I know Joe's experience in Brownfield, and I know they've done a lot of these projects, but I just wanted to address sort of the secret sort of technical aspect of this. And I thought Mr. Woodell, I thought he gave a great summary and important for the board to understand how the brownfield works and to, give you all the comfort that what's going to be happening on the site. So I thought he did a nice job on that. For SECRA, hazardous waste and remediation has been a tricky topic for SECRA. Been a number of litigations on how do you treat cleanups and SECRA. There's Bronx Community with School Authority in New York City. I had a case out on Long Island in Glen Cove. It's been a tricky issue of how to manage it. So the way I think it breaks out for SECRA purposes is, and I think you all touched on this, does the proposed action result in any significant adverse impacts? I think Mr. Woodell addressed that. The remediation in itself, or the conditions at the site, or the proposed action, the building of the project and the remediation is not going to cause in itself any significant adverse impacts, triggering a pos deck for the purposes of the cleanup, the brownfield. Then SECRA has another function, and that's, does the board, have they taken a hard look at the issue? And I think this is what Mr. Woodell, I think, was addressing. Have the board taken a hard look at the issues involved in remediation, i.e. the conditions at the site, and to some extent the remediation? That's where it's gotten tricky on SECRA. Conditions at the site, you have the phase 1, you have the phase 2. There will be further, as he mentioned, there will be further investigation done as part of the brownfields, but this board has satisfied their look at taking a hard look at what's going on at the site. The tricky part in SECRA has always been the remediation part, because until you're in the site and until you've completed the RAP, the remediation action plan on the brownfields, and the public hearings or whatever, public participation, you don't know exactly what the final remediation is going to be. So what applicants do, and I made sure we did, is we talk about generically, what are the procedures on the brownfields? What are the potential actions that one takes in this type of remediation, so that you as a board and the public has at least an idea of what are the potential remediations. That satisfies your hard look from a SECRA point of view. Then, as Joe said, the DEC is the involved agency here with jurisdiction over the cleanup. They will determine, and they will be the final arbiter of whether we clean to the standards that we have included in our remediation action, final remediation action plan, whether it's restricted residential or it's unrestricted residential. Most multi-use buildings like this are restricted residential because you don't have vegetable gardens typically and the like. But whatever standard our RAP promises, that's what the DEC will hold us to. And the condition from your purposes that you will have will be in your site plan, a condition to site plan approval, well, final site plan approval or building permit, is that we've complied with our cleanup and complied with all the DEC requirements as the involved agency. So the part about, well, we got to go back and revise the neg deck if you don't meet those standards, that's not normal.
I think that, like, we have to close the loop here on the seeker question for the preparation of the neg deck. And so when Paul said that, we're premising a lot of these decisions here on it being a track 1 unrestricted use. I think that that's fine. If what you're saying is that it could end up being an unrestricted use or a restricted use, then it would be helpful for us to know what is the lowest level that it's going to go to, so that they can make their decision based off of that lowest level, with the understanding that it could be even a better cleanup, because that's going to go into it. Because as you mentioned, the board has to take a hard look, but the hard look I think that they're going to take here is one that sort of defers on the decision that the DEC is going to make as the level that you're allowed to do.
But Jaime, that's sort of the part that I'm sort of maybe taking a little bit of issue with. The final cleanup, the neg deck is, does the proposed action going to result in any new significant adverse impact? No, obviously the remediation or the project in itself is not going to create either contamination or is not going to most likely contaminate other offsite or otherwise due to the remediation.
I don't.
That's secret.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. What I'm trying to convey here is that this is all still premised off the idea that you will be doing a brownfield cleanup.
Correct.
To whatever level it is. So for our purposes, it just needs to go in our neg deck that you're going to do a brownfield cleanup that meets some sort of criteria from the DEC. So we just need to know the language to which we're going to be using here, and the board needs to be made aware of it. Preferably,
But Jaime, that's
Michael,
exactly what
you
we included. We will meet the standards. We will comply with all the brownfield standards. We outlined what those are. And we mentioned that there are different types of cleanups. There's restricted, unrestricted, and so forth. And at the end of the day, so the public and what those are. And at the end of the day, the DEC will determine what is the final designated wrap. And they have all their very technical standards. And as Mr. Woodall knows, and they will determine at the end of the day, did we comply with the proper regulations, and did we clean it to the proper standard? It's not something that we don't have a wrap yet. We don't have a final.
Can we say that you will comply with DEC required and approved wrap under the Brownfields program?
I think we have all that. That's exactly what we put in.
All right. So is that enough, Amanda? Is that?
Yeah, it's in the Jaime. It's in the technical, Jaime. It's in the technical memo. What we're going to do? We do it on all these jobs, and I can tell you the one piece that Michael didn't mention, and I don't think Paul did either, and that is once we receive the decision document, the site is indemnified by the state of New York in perpetuity. So you have an indemnification provided by the state of New York. Once you get that decision document, you're all set because it indemnifies anyone and everyone against all claims.
I appreciate that. And I feel comfortable with the information that's been provided in the technical memo. The only thing I will say that I think that anybody with the knowledge of SECRA and how it works process-wise is that if there were for some reason a change in circumstances with the brownfield process before the planning board were to issue their final decisions on the actual land use applications, obviously we could, as the lead agency here, go back to the SECRA determination if it were to be a neg deck or whatever, and it potentially amend it or whatever. Goes without saying. I think that would probably be unlikely given the whole timeline of how these things work. That's right. I think what Jaime and I are getting at here. I understand that DEC controls the whole brownfield process. And I think Paul is right to want to put language in the neg deck to protect us that in the event that something changes with the brownfield process before the board issues their final determinations, we have the right to revisit the neg deck. The determination. that goes without saying, but also we'll put it in the determination to just make sure everyone is well aware that that is a possibility. If for some reason there are changes to either the track 1 plan or the fact that you guys are in the brownfields program.
That caveat, as everyone knows, applies to all the impacts. If there are any new or material changes in circumstances that create any new significant adverse impacts, that you have the right to reopen and supplement.
Correct.
So
correct. But I want to make sure that the board understands. I think Amanda explained it, so I don't want to beat this dead horse.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page.
Okay. But this is it was just a big one because this is, because it's a brownfield site, there's contamination. So I think we're all on the same page now.
Yeah.
Thanks. Good, thanks.
Okay, moving on.
If you can just put that up, just post your list. So we're looking at, I know we're actually getting close here, so.
Yeah, very close. We're on page 9 of 10 pages. We're ready to go to page 10 and we'll be done. All right, so consistency with community plans. The question was, the proposed action may cause a change in the density of development that is not supported by existing infrastructure or is distant from existing infrastructure. And there was a question, Joe Tremelli, that there was some research that they were doing, but they hadn't come back with an answer on the capacity of the water and sewer. Do you want to clarify what that question
Yeah,
was?
I think the sewer were set with. They provided the calculations that we had requested. It's the addition of the fire flow into the water use, the water demand. So Franz, I don't know if you have that information developed yet, but
Franz?
So we don't have the fire flow developed yet. I will note that for the existing condition out there, there is an existing fire hydrant out there that is a high flow fire hydrant, which is it supplies more water than this majority of the standard fire hydrants around. And we are at the pinnacle almost of the hill here. We don't anticipate any issues with fire flow, and if there are any shortcomings, we can handle it within the building itself with some more mechanical means. So we don't anticipate any issue with the fire flow, but we are processing calculations on it.
Okay, and I know Franz, you noted in the technical memo that you were working with the village water department to get confirmation on the assumptions you made or the data you have for that analysis. Did you obtain that yet from the village, from the water department? Were you able to get your hands on that?
We have the fire flow. We don't have a specific declaration from the water department at this time that there is sufficient capacity. However, we are a very minimal use here and just don't anticipate there being any challenge there.
Okay, all right, so just to try to close this question out, can we sort of leave this question, Seth, for staff to get an answer to this? And barring any changes from the presumptions here, it'll be presented to you in the neg deck language once that gets forwarded over, once everything's written up. I think we can handle this administratively, unless there is a prevailing concern by the board that you want to wait.
And I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with that. This is kind of a yes or no question, right? The capacity is there, it's not, and that's something that I'm comfortable leaving for staff to advise us on.
All right, Franz, just work with Joe Tremelli, I guess, to get those answers from NDTs and the water department. And Joe, does he need primarily to talk with Andy?
Yeah, he would have the information that they need.
Okay. Yeah,
Andy, we'll close this ASAP.
Okay, I would send that email like yesterday. I think Andy's going on vacation to Florida, so you know, so maybe tomorrow. So you might want to send him an email ASAP and try to get an answer. Okay. All right.
Franz, I trust you'll jump on that.
Yep, we got it, Joe.
And Franz, when you send that, just copy myself and Paul Frioli as well.
And me as well.
You know, we'll work to get you the answers you need.
And Amanda as well. Just all of us. Just add us all. The proposed action
My
is located.
granddaughter.
The proposed action is located in an area characterized by low density development that will require new or expanded public infrastructure.
I actually think this is just a no, because we determined it's not low density, so.
Yeah, okay. Okay, moving on to, so I'm just gonna, I think barring anything, I think you can actually change this to no now, right?
You could probably, I'd be surprised if E came back anything other than no. You know, regarding the water capacity.
It's just not that big of a project. So yeah, I'd be shocked. The only question is whether or not
We'll obviously dot the i's and get the data, but I'd be very surprised if we found something contrary to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the standard main size, the only thing they accept is 8-inch mains, right, for the water lines, and that should, I'm assuming, Franz, that would normally be enough to handle any flow going in that area, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So is the board comfortable with just changing this to a no here, or would you like to keep this open until we've closed the loop on this, or how do you want to deal with it? Doesn't matter to me.
I mean, you're going to get that additional information. As long as that's the case, you can change it to a no. Whether you click it on during this meeting or not, it's the negative declaration draft that we're going to review and vote on, not this chart.
Okay. So. All right. Okay. The proposed action may create a demand for additional community services from school, police, and fire. Have y'all reached out to OVAC? It looks like you did. I don't know, is
Gina
here? Yeah.
No, we did not reach out to any community service providers. We got that information from publicly accessible information.
Okay.
We did calculate the projected population, compare that to village-wide population, and made some assumptions from there.
All right. I would say if you could just follow up with the fire department, police department, and OVAC, just see if you can get an email out to find out who the right person is to talk to. The police department's pretty easy to get a response from. The OVAC and the fire department may be a little bit more difficult, but you can give me a call tomorrow and we can try to see if we can help coordinate that conversation.
Okay. Will do.
Thank you.
And that's it. That was the last question. So.
Sounds good.
Very good. All right. So I think so. I guess Jaime and Amanda, do you have what you need to take this, to take the next step and start drafting?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Good. So I guess with that, I don't know if we have anything further to discuss on this tonight. Unless any board members have anything else they want to point out before we close this out. I don't see anybody with the bouncing hand. So I think we're good. All right. So yes, Jaime's hand is bouncing. No, you're not. I'm sorry. I'm just
He's motioning to adjourn.
I guess we can move to that. I mean, we don't even need, it's a work session, right? So we wouldn't need to.
No, we don't have to.
There's no motions. Yeah, no motions.
There's no motions, right? We don't normally vote during a work session. So I think on that note, I thank you everybody for your time and going through this.
Thank you.
Detailed manner. So
thank you.
Very good.
Awesome. So have a great night, everybody. I think we are.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Over.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
All
All right. Take care. Bye.